So moved.
Moved by Sue,
Second.
seconded by Kelly. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are approved. Superintendent Anselm, any additions or deletions to the agenda?
Yes, there are two under the consent agenda for human resources. On page 3, we want to add Julie Kent as a teacher aide. Effective date will be 1/28.
Just add her to C.
Yep. Add her on page 3, C, correct. And then on page 4, F, we want to add a note to Christine Ebersole. We want to say it's contingent upon Rome City Civil Service Commission approval.
Okay, I'll take a motion to accept the changes to consent agenda. Moved by John,
Second.
seconded by Kelly. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So amended. All right, and I'm going to start off the board recognition today with a little bit of sad news. We had a passing of a former school board president, Patricia Riedel. Ms. Riedel served 6 years as the president of the school board as part of 3 non-consecutive 3-year terms and 2 partial terms. The board wants to thank her and her family for her service and dedication, and our condolences go out to the family. From a student recognition and staff, we want to thank all of the cabaret performers and music staff that went into putting the production together. Great work, and love to see such a great performance. For our winter sports, we just want to give a shout out to our student athletes, coaching staff for all of their hard work and dedication while maintaining good academics. Looking forward to seeing how the season progresses. Any shout outs?
Yes, RFA.
And our superintendent had set up a day so that board members could go to specific schools to just see what the whole spirit of the school is. So we went to RFA a week ago. Paula, myself, and Jen were there. It was a wonderful presentation by the principal of RFA and his staff. We spoke a lot about attendance and the importance of attendance in school, and we kind of correlated that with looking forward as our students graduate and go on to jobs, and how there are many aspects of that correlate right away, and you should, obviously have good attendance also within a work environment. They are looking at having a job fair and a career fair combined that's going to be through the Rome Chamber, is scheduling it with the education department of the Rome Chamber with the guidance office up there, and they're putting that together, so we spoke about that. And we went through a lot of the alignments of educational standards, and we spoke about that. So it was an excellent opportunity to actually see from the standpoint of being there and understanding from the principal himself and his staff what goes on at RFA. And we will be having a tour at Bellamy. I believe it's a week from Friday. And encourage all board members who signed up, and if you haven't, please do, because you would definitely see a whole different perspective of it, hearing it firsthand and seeing it. Paul, is there anything you'd like to add? No? Jen? No? Great. So, and thank you for the staff to putting that together.
For sure.
Okay.
Yeah. It's important for you to see the school improvement plan come into life,
Right.
rather than just hearing it at the table.
And that's why the importance of these visits. It's important for the board to see, not just us talking about it, but then getting to see it.
Can I give one more shout out?
Of course.
I always talk about how leadership is not a lone sport. I might be in the chair as a superintendent, but I have many teammates behind me that are lifting this work. And tonight, I really want to give a special shout out to my cabinet team members who are here. We kind of feel like sometimes we're doing double work and double duty because we're always uncovering something, we're always fixing something while we're trying to keep the day-to-day. And so from the Office of Instruction to the CFO to our Director of Human Resources, truly, I just wanted to acknowledge acknowledge my team because sometimes at the cabinet level, it's a lonely place to be. And so I just want you all know in public that I value you, I appreciate you, I see the hard work that we're doing every single day, and I couldn't ask for a better team. Thank you for all you do.
I did want to say something really quick, just on that topic of the students and stuff, and a shout out to the hockey team, and I believe, I'm not sure if it was the basketball team, but I do know that the hockey team did go to the schools and read, and they also taught them to skate. And there was a really nice article in the Sentinel, but also a parent had wrote on social media about the impact that her son had from the hockey players coming to read and then being in the class, and that they're gonna, that it really meant a lot to them. So I wanted to say that's very important for the kids to get involved with the youngers, I think.
And that has happened in a couple
Yes.
of the elementary schools. So Ridge Mill was one, but we also had some of that experience at Denty. And they're going to continue some of that because it's always important for our younger students to see the older students now who can say that they walk these hallways, but then now the students can look up to them. So we have the football team and the hockey team that did that, but they're planning to continue to expand that opportunity. So thank you for mentioning that.
All right, we will move on to public comment for our agenda items. Are these the only two? Okay, first up is Mr. Butters, and the subject is redistricting.
Everything that everybody just said was wonderful, and your school board taking care of the students, redistricting, don't take it the wrong way, but I don't think any of you are qualified to understand engineering, construction, traffic flow, and all the other things that are involved in this redistricting plan that you're talking about. All I saw was the last meeting, and you had 3 different topics that you thought you'd vote, or 3 different agendas that you'd vote on. I would suggest that you don't make any votes. RFA 20 years ago, I don't know who shoved that through. The roof leaked, the pool leaked, the track was substandard. But, let me see, we can't mention any names. But whoever got the bus contract got a real good deal because every student had to be bused to RFA. You went into the schools and saw the children. Did anybody go before classes started and see what a disaster the traffic is when children are being dropped off? Does anybody go at the end of the day and see what a disaster it is when children are being picked up? And parents that are in a hurry and they don't have time, they don't think. I take a great-grandson to Denty. Denty's in my backyard. In the summer I'll walk, in the winter I'm not gonna walk. And there's 2 stop signs because there's a loop. Okay, is that supposed to be? Somebody designed that. And I stopped, and I went like I should, and the person that should have stopped here didn't, and decided to run into the side of me. Yeah, okay, it happens. RFA, there's one way out, and it's a single lane. And people want to go this way, and people want to go that. Whoever thought this stuff up, people just don't see the foreseeable future. This redistricting doesn't affect the 5th, 6th, 7th, well, the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders for sure, because they're talking about 3 to 4 years for this to happen. Well, they'll be up in RFA, and that's probably still going to be there, and that's probably where they're all going to go. So now, how many students are you really planning that you have to move around, and how many other ones do you think the population is going to expand on? Taxes are going to go up. I'm not worried. I'm 60. I'm going to die soon. Not worried about it. I'm here for, like, my oldest son. He's got 4 children going to school. And most of my other kids don't have kids, or their kids are already somewhere else or something like that. But if there's an engineer on there, go ahead and tell me, hey, I'm an engineer. And if you are, then you design it. Don't go to an outside contractor. Whoever gave you these plans, they're traveling salesmen. They're here to sell you their idea. And once they sell your idea, they're gone. and then you get a contractor. And contractors, yep, we got the bid, and they're gonna do whatever. Does anybody ever come in under their bid? Never. Does anybody ever come in on time? Hardly ever. And I'm in construction, and I've been around. I have 11 children. I have 14 grandchildren. I've seen the school district for 43 years. Thank you for more than 3 minutes, but just listen, if you can just listen to everything I said, and if you can go home tonight and say, are we really ready to make a $75, $85 million decision, and does it have to be that much? And I left my regular job early to be here, and I'm not working my second job right now, so I have to leave. Thank you for all the time, I appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you.
I'm just going to put that on there. Okay, next up we have, I'm sorry, I'm going to say Paul because I'm going to butcher it if I try to say your last name. Subject is site options between RCS and Clough.
Good evening, everyone. It's good to see the older students getting involved with the younger students. Brings me back to days at Stockbridge, where we had a K through 12. I had a graduating class of 39 kids. So this is a little different for me. However, I will second what that gentleman just said with transportation. I've got a background in civil engineering, and I strongly, I'm not here to put down other engineers, that's not the point, but I think the point was made that it really needs to take a hard look at before school starts and after school starts, how that's going to look and how the public's going to react to that. We have an opportunity to really do some major improvements that will benefit the community. I know Anthony Pacenti on February 8th, I think it is, or coming up in February, he's got a meeting over here on the base. They're going to be doing some work on the base to open up Perimeter Road. That's going to add more business to this area that's already being very congested. I highly recommend everyone on this board to attend that walkthrough and see what this base is going to look like. That will make a drastic impact on this building and the traffic coming in out of this one road. I strongly consider you to consider the old Rome Catholic building. While it may not be the ideal location, it has at least two access roads, Cypress Street and the side road, that would provide adequate transportation routes for not only cars, but also for buses. It also has the necessary space. And I also provided recommendations to come up with the additional funding necessary. I know it may be the most costly project, but I really think that's our best option with what we're looking at right now, and especially towards the future. And who's to say in 10 years we can't look at Clough and say, hey, let's put a second story on Clough. That's always on the cards. But if we close our doors on Rome Catholic and that option, that may never happen again. So don't sell yourself short on the cards you have dealt in front of you. Thank you.
Okay, and on to our superintendent's report.
Okay.
So we're excited. A lot is going on in the district. Not only are we solving the issues of yesteryear, we are also solving the issues of this year and moving on up long term. So can you put the next slide for me? We are excited to announce, we talked about strategic planning, and we launched our strategic planning last week. So on January 14, the consultants were in-house. They kicked off the strategic planning process with our students who worked on the vision, values, and mission statements. And so soon you'll be seeing a draft of that here at the table. And then on January 15, we also held our first meeting of the strategic planning Meeting Steering Committee. The steering committee consists of members of the community, consists of staff, teachers, families, etc. So we are going to meet about 6 times, and then the committee would have completed its work. There are other upcoming opportunities. These were the first 2. We are putting together some focus groups. The board will be one focus group. We'll have a teacher focus group, staff focus group, families and community as one group, and also want to make sure that we hear from more students, so we are going to have a student focus group as well. The focus groups are one-time event, so that those who couldn't commit to a 6-meeting steering committee, they have an opportunity to still participate and lend their voice. In addition, we also know that some people may not want to come and sit and talk, and so we're going to put together a thought exchange survey, specifically focusing on what individuals are thinking in terms of what they would like to see long-term for our Rome City School District. The survey will open February 10 and will close on February 24th. Again, more opportunities for individuals if they have a thought that they can share. In addition, there is a board retreat that is scheduled for March 5th. The board will also be engaging not only in terms of collaboration and continuing to do our work and board service work, but also making sure that they are involved in the process so that they know what's being said from the beginning, so they can also speak to our strategic planning process. Lastly, we are in the process of designing what we are calling a Community Design Day, and it's going to be a whole day Saturday event where, again, we're going to give members of the community and also the school community, the community at large, any businesses, business owners, an opportunity to come together to really have one more say and a voice on shaping the future of Rome City School District. So we're really excited. And Sue, I don't know if you wanted to say anything about what you've heard about the steering committee, but that would be great.
Individual one who from the Rome Chamber had spoken to me, she attended it, and she spoke very highly of the individuals we used to bring it forward. She said that it was one of the best presentations she'd ever been to. So looking forward, I'm very looking forward to hearing about it and seeing how it works.
Awesome. The next exciting thing, I don't know in the history of Rome, I may not be aware, but I've asked, and it has never been done. So I'm going to say that for the first time in Rome, we're going to acknowledge a Rome Teacher of the Year. One of the things that New York State does is select a New York State Teacher of the Year. And so we decided that we were going to use the same process to be able to have individuals have an opportunity to nominate teachers, so that out of all of those nominations, we can choose a Teacher of the Year. So the call for nomination went out during the week of January 20th, and we gave people just a couple of days. And it's amazing that 48 nominations were received. Right? And so this week, we're going to crown the first person as the Rome Teacher of the Year. And here's what that's going to do. That individual that was selected locally, we will then submit their names to be to have the opportunity to be chosen as the New York State Teacher of the Year. So stay tuned. It's going to be a surprise. They're not going to know, but it's going to happen this week, and it's also going to be on our e-news and our Facebook, and that person will have a chance to be nominated for New York State Teacher of the Year. And I'm hoping that we win, because we want to be on the map. Okay?
Why do I envision this as like Publishers Clearinghouse? Like you're going to show up their classroom with like the big sign.
I think that's awesome.
Yes. So it's going to be great. I'm not going to give away too much because I want to surprise whoever it is, and you guys will see pictures, and the PR people are here, so they're ready to do this alongside us. So it's really exciting. But just seeing that in a week time, people really took the time to nominate their colleagues, and out of that, there will be one nominee. So I'm excited about that. Since parents are listening to us, I want to prep this by saying we are beginning to encourage parents to have their students participate in state testing. The ELA and math testing is super important, and that usually starts sometimes in late March all the way to April. And so we're going to do some PR around that. Our PR team is working to encourage parents and families to have their kids sit for the exam. And here are the importance of student participation in state testing. It measures academic growth. And as you all know, this year, we have some specific targets. We know that our students have not been meeting proficiency in ELA and math. And in order to make sure that we are really assessing the entire district, the more students participate, the better, because it really will give us a sense of whether students are meeting the expectations. The second thing is that it supports school and district improvement. Participation rate impacts the accuracy of school and district performance data. So if we're going to use data to be able to determine where we are at and where we're going, especially through our strategic planning process, we need to know the areas in need of improvement. And the more students that are involved, the more we'll know. And lastly, around equity and accountability, state testing ensures that every student's progress is considered, and we need to help close the achievement gaps and hold schools accountable for providing high-quality education for all learners. So again, parents, please, I know about like maybe 10 years or 2 commissioners ago, there was a big thing about how the state testing was tied to teachers' evaluation. It is no longer, it hasn't been a thing for a long time, but some individuals are still thinking that that's the case. It is not the case. And so please, 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 this year, we really need your students to participate in the state's testing in order to know how to help them if they are struggling, but also if they are doing well, how to make sure that we enhance their skills as well.
There was a lot of misconception, and I think there's still a lot of misconception out there of why, and that's why a lot of parents did opt out, but to get it out there and understand why. Because I think, too, you didn't even understand why you were opting out. You were just being told, so again, I think it is very important to know why these are being done, and now you saying it and putting it out there makes a big difference, because I think they all thought, and it was that way at the time when it first started, that the teachers, and it was hard for people to say for their children to go in and do this, but it is important. We really do need so that we can go forward.
Yeah. So the principals are ready. As soon as we have PR going, the principals are ready to send out that information. But I felt like it was time, because February will be here very soon, and before we know it, testing will be here. So I want to put it out there early, and more information to come. So next slide. Lots of great things are happening in our district. So in partnership with the NAACP and the African American Heritage Association, we are proud to be hosting an evening of celebration in honor of Black History Month. Again, I don't know a lot of the history of whether these things happen. I think they did, but happened on a smaller scale. But this year, we really want to push it because it's an opportunity for the community to come together. We're going to have poetry, storytelling. We're going to have students dancing. You're going to see artwork from students as you enter. Students are going to be ushering you in. We have a guest speaker coming in. I will be speaking as well. But it's supposed to be, first of all, a celebration, but also because we are an institution of learning, we're going to provide some nuggets of learning so that people will walk away not only feeling good and seeing our student performance, but at the same time they can leave with a nugget of information that they did not know before. So we're really excited. We are inviting you all. It is Tuesday, February 11 at the RFA Auditorium at 6:30 p.m. They are excited. The RFA students are getting ready, and I can tell you there's a lot of people behind the scenes that are working on it, so we really, really want you to participate. So the entire community is invited. And lastly, as we talked about with the board school visit, the next board school visit, again, making sure that we have the school improvement plan comes to life. That's going to be at Bellamy, February 7 at 10 a.m. And it is important if all of the board members can attend and see things in action. That would be great. The more you learn about the school, the better it is, so that you can make the best decision here at the table. And I would say lastly, I'm just ad-libbing right now, there's a lot going on. We hear all of those things in the news. And remember, we are an institution of learning where our goal is to make sure that every student feels safe, every staff member that we have working for us, regardless of the situation. And I can tell you, regardless of what's going on out there and all of the conversations that's happening in the news, just know that we are committed as an institution, especially following school education law, to keep students safe. So meaning that we don't give information out about our students if people are not on the card, if a parent does not give us permission to share information about their student, we are not. And so tomorrow we will be having conversations about some of these things in terms of if they are on our doorsteps, what should we do with it with the principals? So again, it's not about politics, it's about making sure that we are an institution of learning, and number one, we're going to keep our students safe, and we're going to make sure that the staff members are safe. Okay?
So that is the end of my report.
Great. Moving on to our student board member report.
Hi. So we want to first start by saying that winter sports are doing really well as last Friday, Rhapsody performed and hosted 5 schools like Waterville, Herkimer, Liverpool, Holland Patton, and our own Stroud did their performance, as well as Rhapsody is touring on Tuesday and Thursday. Tuesday they're going to Denty and Gansevoort, Thursday John Joy and Stokes.
We also have day 2 of our show choir festival this Friday. Tickets are $10. The house opens at 7 and the show starts at 7:30. If tickets are still available, the box office opens at 6:30.
We just had so many schools that wanted to join us because we're just great hosts that we had to split it into 2.
Great. I love that. Thank you, ladies. All right, on to our 2 workshops for the evening. The first is Student Support Services.
I'm passing the baton on to our Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction, Jennifer DePerno. Come.
Do you have a presentation or no? No, it's on. I'm going to put it on the thumb drive or something. Oh.
Good evening, board members and the community that is watching at home. So tonight what we have for you is part 2 of our district priorities. So the first one, if you remember, was a while back. I believe it was in November, where I did a presentation on academic rigor and excellence on priority 1. So tonight what we're going to be looking at is priority 2. And we have 2 presentations out of the Office of Instruction. The first is going to be done by Amanda Jones, Director of Counseling Services, and also she has Kelly Burt, associates with her, consulting, to also talk to us about the District Priority 2, Wellness and Equity Implementation, specifically the MTSS process. So if you ladies would like to come on up.
Oh, okay.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. I want to apologize for my voice. I've been sick. I'm still trying to get rid of all the congestion, so I apologize if I'm a little nasally tonight. I'm really honored to be here. I'm really excited to talk to you about the work that we've been doing. Kelly and I have been working really closely together for a little bit, and it's directly in alignment with all the work we've been doing on wellness and equity. So, obviously, our focus for District Priority 2 is the wellness and equity. I think you've all seen this on our all of our website and all over the district, all the work that we've been doing district-wide. And then underneath that umbrella, we're really going to focus in on target number 4, which is evaluating the quality of the mental health services that we have in the district, and then really identifying where the gaps are and what we need to do to improve throughout the district on mental health in particular. There are 3
points that I'm going to focus in on, and I'm not going to go in order. I'm going to go a little out of order so it makes better sense with the information flow. But we're looking at evaluating those services and supports K-12, identifying where the gaps are, addressing them through the development of a multi-tiered system of support plan, and we're going to focus that on not just the academic side, but also the mental health and behavioral, social, emotional pieces of students and their well-being. We're looking at implementing a universal screening process that's focused on mental health, and we're also going to be conducting frequent social and emotional learning walkthroughs to ensure that Tier 1 student management practices are implemented with fidelity district-wide. And that's where I want to start my focus, is on the walkthroughs. So when we're doing those walkthroughs, I can tell you that personally I've been in each building and done some walkthroughs so far this year, and looking at our our Tier 1 student work. These are the overarching things that we're looking for when we're looking for wellness and equity. Some of the things that I've seen, and again, this is just a snapshot. We're going in for a short amount of time, usually it's under 10 minutes, just trying to see, where are the classrooms at in these areas. Seeing some really great things about teacher-student relationships, really seeing a lot of positive interactions between the teachers and students, calling students by name, really spinning things in a positive way. If the kid maybe answers something that's maybe not really what the teacher was looking for, teachers are finding ways to continue to engage that student and not make them feel like, oh, that's the wrong answer, but really like, let's keep going. How can we help our friends? Really great skill sets in those areas. Seeing a lot of routines, right? Teachers are putting posting and following routines so kids know what to expect. It's predictable. That really kind of helps to reduce anxiety that we see a lot of times in classrooms and stuff. A lot of community building, a lot of group work happening with students. It's not just everybody sitting at a desk doing their own thing, but many teachers are doing a lot of group work with kids and letting them build community, structuring the classroom in a way that they're able to speak with their peers and work together on different projects. Some of the things I think we can definitely focus in more on is this restorative practices. There are pockets of folks in the district that have done some really great work on developing those skill sets, and it's very evident when you go in and do a walkthrough which teachers those are. But I think as a district, really continuing that focus and offering those PD opportunities for staff to continue. Some of the restorative things are things that are really situational, and you're not going to necessarily see them in a walkthrough, but you could kind of tell, that they're, again, this evidence of like growth mindset, the way that they're talking to, what are the expectations in the classroom? Did the kids have a voice in developing the rules of that classroom? Sometimes you can see that based on, the stuff that's on the walls and the conversations kids are having. So those are some really great things that we've seen so far. The other two things that we're focusing on, I'm going to let Kelly speak about the work we've been doing on that, implementing a universal screening process, and also that multi-tiered system, developing that framework and putting that in place for all the schools. So I'm going to see if I can get to Kelly's presentation. Or do we need to back out, or can I just click on it? What do you think?
Click on it and then it should just pop up.
I'm going to let you go, girl.
Yeah. Luckily we have Wi-Fi now, so.
Oh, can you get rid of that for me?
Yeah,
sorry. Another thing I'll mention is that all of the work that we're doing is really in alignment with the school improvement plans. So if you were to go and look at each individual school improvement plan, you're going to see pieces of this work in those improvement plans, especially working with Kelly. All of the teams that are happening at the school level are working directly with Kelly. So I'll let Kelly take it away.
Hi, my name is Kelly Burt, and I know that I was able to interact with several of you last year. I've been this is my second year working alongside Rome in this, and so I know there are some new faces, and so I'm really glad to be here, really grateful to be a part of this collaboration. And so it is really, truly a collaborative effort. I am an independent educational consultant, but I am just one piece of this process. My role is to be a guide and a mentor to make sure that Rome can build sustainable systems, and that we're getting Rome to a place where they won't need me anymore. My whole goal is to work myself out of a job by working with all of these groups here. So I'm going to give you a little bit about what we've been doing for a while. So Rome was very fortunate to receive a grant through the Office of New York State Office of Education and the Office of Mental Health. It's the first time those two offices have collaborated on a grant of this level. So it's really kind of a unique opportunity for Rome to put something out there of this caliber. And very fortunately, the grant's three main target areas are also in direct alignment with what the school is hoping to do in terms of setting priorities and in strategic planning. So, because one of the things about receiving grant money is that when they give you lots of money, they kind of expect things. So these are some of the things that grant is expecting. One of those, again, is a universal mental health screener, an integrated multi-tiered system of support. And for folks who are less familiar with an MTSS, I'm going to show you an example of what that looks like, just so that that alphabet soup doesn't feel so yucky. And then a system of care, which really just means, are we connecting all of the things that we have available to us and making sure that people aren't in silos, right? That Connected Community Schools is actually a part of the process, that our community is a part of the process, and it's not just teachers and administration behind closed doors. And, we're making sure that this system of care is really about supporting that whole child, the whole family, all of the staff, all of the above, right? So that's the end game. Not an easy task, but an important one. So this is what a multi-tiered system of support is. It's essentially a triangle. I love triangles. They're kind of my life. That's why I do the work that I do. And you mentioned you heard Amanda mention Tier 1. So Tier 1, when we're talking about Tier 1 is the stuff that we do for all kids all the time, right? It's your standard, really good, solid curriculum. In the case of mental health or social and emotional learning, it might be something like a really, really good social and emotional skills curriculum, or access to regular learning around mental health pieces of the puzzle. And in theory, if you're doing your job really, really well, and you know your students, and you know your families, and you know your community, you've put together a nice Tier 1 that catches 80% of your student population. That should be enough for about 80%. Now, we always know that what we do for everyone is not necessarily what everybody needs, right? So a multi-tiered system of support is about getting everybody what they need, no more and no less. So then if Tier 1 just isn't cutting it for a few kids, then we move up into Tier 2, where there's more targeted intervention, things like small group support, things like, especially if we're thinking about social and emotional learning or mental health, it might mean small groups, it might mean informal counseling, it might mean checking in with an adult that they are really close with during the day. Just anything like that that's a little more informal, but definitely not stuff we're doing for all kids. And up at the top there, and that should catch your next 15%. And up at the top is kind of that more intensive intervention, really you know what, we're getting everything at Tier 1, we're getting everything at Tier 2, and it just doesn't feel like it's really supporting this kid or this family the way that we would expect it to. So then we're going to take the next step forward and make sure that student or family is receiving highly intensive, highly individualized wraparound supports. And up at the top, it's kind of the tip there, because ideally we only want to be impacting about 5% of our population. Because if you did most of your kids, if you did 80% of your kids with highly individualized services, I think you'd be having a pretty hard time. That'd be a lot to manage. So the goal is to be preventative and proactive at the bottom as much as possible, and then meet kids where they're at as they move forward. So when we think about what that might look like when we're combining academics and social and emotional learning and mental health, this is what something like that might look like. And so there's a little highlight there. This is just an example, right? We're working on building what Rome's will look like. So do not copy paste this anywhere. This is not really what we're aiming for just yet, but this is an example of what that might look like. Because we do want to make sure that the academics are not necessarily separate from the mental health and the social emotional, because one impacts the other and vice versa, and they all go around in loops. So that this might be something it could potentially look like. And each buildings is going to look just a teensy bit different. We're going to have an overarching structure that is consistent across the district, but each building is a little bit different. So we know that we're going to make sure that fits the need of each individual building. So just an example, right? This is not a copy paste. We're going to get there. And we are using the work of implementation science to do this. So we've been at this for about a year and a half, and we have shifted from our exploration phase into an installation phase. And so I believe you all have access to these slides. I embedded some work around this so that you can, there's a clickable link there if you want to know more about implementation science and why we are doing the process we're doing. And where we're at in installation is kind of, okay, we've done some, and I'm going to talk to you about the work that we've done through exploration. And at this point, we're looking at, okay, we've done our exploration work, we've done our readiness work, now we're ready to move forward and put in some infrastructure. What do we need to do to make sure we can take the information we have and do something cool with it that's really good for kids and families and staff? So that's where we're at. The whole goal is also to do this. This is a slow to go fast kind of thing. This is a big undertaking. This is a huge lift, and this is a lot of change potentially for students, for families, and for staff. So we are intentionally kind of taking our time through these stages to make sure we're building trust, to make sure that staff and students and families and community all have a say, so that we're all making sure that everything isn't happening to them, but happening with them. So here's what we've done so far. We've surveyed all staff to hear about their perspectives on the current mental health supports available at Rome. And once that general survey was done, I was able to move into every single building and do small staff focus groups, so that way staff could take that survey information and expand on it with me. So I was able to spend a lot of time in every single building talking directly with small groups of staff, so they could really get into the nitty-gritty and tell me what was going on for them and what their experience was. We also surveyed students grades 4 through 12 so that we could hear their perspective on this as well, and they came out with some awesome stuff. And if you want to know more about that, please reach out to me, send me an email. I'll make sure you have my contact information, because there's some really, really cool things that students shared in there. They're so insightful. We established a district level committee, and we began meeting in December. So we've got one overarching big picture team that's at the district level, which doesn't necessarily mean it's all district administration. We've got a representative from each building, and each representative in the building has a different level of stakeholder. We've got teachers, we've got support staff, we've got mental health counselors, we've got administration, we've got a little bit of everybody. We're also going to be bringing in students and family or community members into the process as well. We're just kind of getting things off the ground and seeing where we're at. So they began meeting in December, and their job through the rest of this year is to do two things. One is to build the framework of that triangle that's going to be consistent district-wide, so that way we have a draft of something we can work with that the buildings can then take and make it fit for them. The second is that we've got a list of universal mental health screeners that we've kind of pared down for the group, and we're going to give them that list and give them a chance to really pick those screeners apart and decide which one they think is going to be the best fit for Rome, because we don't just want to toss one out there and say good luck to everybody, because that's not fair. So we want to make sure that everybody is getting a chance, that every representative from each building is going to get a chance to have a say in what this looks like, feels like, sounds like, and then they'll also get a chance to talk about what the rollout is going to look like, because it's also really difficult to suddenly ask every single student in a district to fill out a survey like that and then not know what to do next. So we're going to really make sure that we're rolling it out slowly, piloting it, and scaling it up as we go, so people feel confident and safe with it. We've also got building level committees at each building currently developing. Several have already begun meeting this month, and more are beginning to meet in February. And their job through this year is to do something called resource mapping. So what the building level committees are doing this year is taking a look at what's already in their buildings, right? Because one of the awesome things about Rome is there's so many good things happening here already. We don't want to just add new things. We want to organize the closet of what's already happening in Rome. So we're getting buildings to take a look at what's really going on in there and saying, what's here? Is it working? Is it not working? Are we doing enough of it? What do we think of it? What's the data? And kind of unpack that. And that way we can help them do that. And they're taking the survey data that I mentioned before that is applicable to their specific building, and looking for alignment and looking for priority areas. So that's what the building level committees are doing this year. And we, through the fall, completed a family and community member survey, and we've had over 500 responses with some really insightful things in there. So I'm still working on unpacking that data and aggregating it a little bit, but also some very incredible insights in that as well. And I've been really lucky to align with the Rome Teacher Center this year. We're offering some trainings that are in alignment with this work so that teachers can start getting more background in some of this work as they're able to. So that's where we're at so far. I know that was a lot in a very short amount of time about a big topic, so please reach out if you have additional questions, okay? All right.
And I just want to quickly wrap up our presentation. Thanks for bearing with us between the two slide decks. Okay, so just an overview. I know Kelly's talking that each of the buildings is going to be doing resource mapping, and these are just some examples of the resources that we do have in the buildings throughout the district. This isn't a comprehensive list. This is just some examples of things that we've identified as things that are supportive at each of the tiers, and I kind of combined tiers 2 and 3 without getting into the minutia of all of that, but some of these folks deal with both of those tiers, and so some of those supports are, kind of, they're more fluid. They're not, in one box or the other box. So these are just some community partnerships that we have, school social worker and school counselor, AIS counseling, which is short-term counseling services. We have all of our pre-K through 6 classrooms are getting lessons in social and emotional learning. So these are just some examples of the things that we have identified that are happening in the district. So that brings us to the end. So what additional information do you all need to know to help you further understand how we're implementing this wellness and equity priority target number 4?
So just a couple quick questions for me. First, thank you. I mean, you can see the enthusiasm and the passion with what you've presented, and obviously a much needed system within our school district. Just from a overall standpoint, you said we're about 1.5 years in. So how long is the actual grant? And do you feel like from a status, like we are on track?
Yeah, so the grant is a total of 5 years, but the first year we didn't get much traction because there was, again, as Kelly mentioned, this is the first time that these two entities have come together and offered a grant. And so it took a full calendar year to even get them to give us some direction on what was going to happen and what was appropriate, and also certain things that the state education department requires, like an RFP process, the Office of Mental Health does not require, and so there were conversations about should we need to go through that process or not, and so you would go to them and they'd say no, you don't, and then we would come locally and they would say yes, you do. And so again, the RFP process is long, and so again, that first year we really didn't get much traction. But as Kelly said, we move slow to move fast. So this beginning stage of like all that first part was gathering information and getting all the stakeholders, getting people on board. That's where it's going to take the most time. So we are on track. We still have 2.5 years. So we're only halfway through the grants whole. We have plenty of time to get done, and we are on track with our plan has always been. Right, Kelly? Do you have anything else you want to add?
And because we are using implementation science, most of the research around large-scale change like this suggests that good change only happens within a 3 to 5 year stance when using this process. So this is very much not throwing something at the wall and seeing what sticks, but being very intentional with our time and our work, so that way we know exactly what we're aiming for and we can apply it, and it makes it much less likely that we have to realize, we tried this thing and it didn't work and now we have to backtrack. So by doing a lot of the work at the front end that is a little more time consuming, it means we are more likely to be efficient and effective when we do put things into place.
Thank you.
How do you find, besides a teacher maybe, or how does someone start the services? Or if, maybe you don't see, is there a way for the parent to reach out? Or is there, how does it all begin? You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not trying to be.
No, it's a good question. Yeah, so it all begins in that tier 1, right? So the classrooms is where it starts. So all the students are getting that tier 1 instruction, that tier 1 support. And then as it's being noticed, there's many data points you could be looking at. You could be looking at attendance, discipline, academics, behaviors. You could look at any of those things. If there's some data that's showing that that student has a need in one of those areas, then there's a team at the school that kind of looks at that data and tries to figure out what are the best ways to support individual students based on the data that we are seeing. And of course, that involves parents, it involves other stakeholders throughout the school, but there's a team of people that are looking at it from the different lenses of whatever the data point is that you're looking for.
I think that's great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead. Yeah.
The other piece of the puzzle here with this is the part of the reason that this work is happening here at Rome is because we, at this point, don't have answers to some of those questions yet. We are developing a system because currently, and this is true for not just Rome, but many, many schools across the state and across the country, in that it used to be that you'd get a couple of kids here and there who you're like, ooh, there's something really going on. We'll refer to the social worker, and you never have to worry about it again because they're being taken care of. But I know that no one is a stranger to seeing the news and, the conversations around the rising needs around, a youth mental health crisis and some of these things, in that classrooms are becoming like slightly therapeutic spaces, and we're wrestling with the need to address a system that has never existed in education before, that we have not necessarily had the infrastructure to do the things that kids need right now. And that's part of the reason we're doing this work, is that we notice the need and we want to fulfill that need, and we need the structures and the systems in order to make it happen, because otherwise everyone's running around putting out fires instead of bringing in Smokey the Bear and installing smoke detectors. So that's really our work, is to stop putting out so many fires and utilizing so many resources that way, and do the preventative, proactive piece that schools have not traditionally been built for. But that's the work, and that's why we're here.
And it's important to have a framework that is consistent across the board. Because again, as you all know, I'm very big on expectations, high expectation for all, and consistency of practice across the district. So when you have a framework that is now implemented in all of the buildings, no matter where a child attends school, they get the same support that they need. And Kelly and I talked about that early on.
I had one question also. So you mentioned community schools. If there are other agencies in the local area who are also providing mental, social, emotional type support services, is there going to be an avenue for them to become involved? Just so we're all on the same, as Nurlan was saying, if we're all working towards the same expectation, not that they would have the same framework in place, but they might have the same mission or end goal. So I just wondered if there is a time where we involve others?
Yeah, so the system we have right now with Connected Community Schools, they are kind of our door to get to the other agencies, right? And so we do have partnerships with other agencies already, and they will be a part of this process as we dig into it, as the building levels dig into it, and as the district level digs into it. We already have some of those folks at the table looking at this with us, and the teams at the district level, but also at the buildings. For example, I just went back a slide. We have the YWCA. They run groups at both Stroud and at RFA. So that's a partnership that we have. Superintendent Anselm and I've worked with that and gotten that in place, and the contracts are signed and things like that. So we do have other agencies in the community. We have satellite mental health offices in some of our schools, and that's based on the referrals that we're going through community schools. Those satellite mental health offices are staffed by folks at the neighborhood center or folks at the community health and behavioral services organization. So we already have some of those partnerships in place, and they're already a part of the system.
And some of the services that these partnerships provide, they're already providing it for Tier 2 and Tier 3 of intervention that students need. So when we're talking about that mental health clinic, in addition to the counseling that our counselors can provide, sometimes a student need more of a therapeutic type of setting, that's when they come in. So that's the Tier 2 or Tier 3 levels of intervention that they can provide.
That's right. And this even goes, and the nice thing about the satellite mental health offices is that really removes those barriers for kids that can't get to the clinics with transportation issues or things like that. We have those partnerships so they can access right in the schools. So yes, those all of the community partners are a part of this process. They'll be a part of this structure.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we have our special education update.
Okay, so while she's getting that ready, our next one is going to also wellness and equity and implementation. This is going to be switching gears and going over to the Director of Supported Learning, where we're going to focus on Target 2, specifically looking at the disproportionality of our students with disabilities. So if Dr. Chichaya could come on up.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. So, how do I switch around? Because I'm not familiar with this setup.
So if you just want to go to the next slide, you could just click the little arrows right here.
Okay, so, hi, everyone. I don't always see everybody on the board, so hello. I'm Dr. Kristen Chichaya, the Director of Supported Learning here in Rome, and I am here to talk to you about our cross goal, working with Director of Counseling and some of the services that we put in, and I'm going to be talking about suspension. So my stuff isn't so great, but it is something that happens, it is something that's necessary, and we do have disproportionality, so it's something that is a part of our district priority. It's number 2 there, and we want to make sure our kids are in a safe, nurturing, learning environment, and that pairs very well with the social emotional learning that Amanda Jones and her department is working on. And on the other end of that, is discipline and some of the things that are happening in school that do make kids not feel safe. And so as a part of the Students with Disabilities department, we have to deal with that. We have significant state oversight. So the targets were developed over the summer, and we have been on a list for suspension with students with disabilities for since the 21-22 school year when I took over as director in the department. And as director at that time, I was aware of the issues and put in place and have been working very hard since the 21-22 school year to reduce these numbers. So when you look at this, and one thing I'll say about data is I have a lot of data in this, and I'll go through it and sort of explain some things, because one thing I like about looking at data is it can give us a lot of information, and the other thing I like about looking at data is that it can confuse us, and you have to really understand what you're looking at in terms of data, because it can be manipulated, it can be read wrong, it can look not so great, or it can look great and not be great. So I want to really make sure I explain this to you, and if you have any questions, to just ask me about it. As you can see, we've had a decrease of referrals. That was one of our goals, was to decrease referrals. And I think working interdepartmentally, we've really targeted those need for referrals, and there is a need for referrals often. But not always. So we have had a good significant decrease, but one thing we talked about in our department meetings was, when the decrease goes down, it doesn't necessarily change the percentage. We need an overall decrease in total number of referrals all the way around. The percentage looks exactly the same, even though we're making great progress in terms of the numbers of referrals. So I hope that kind of makes sense. So you can see we've had an overall decrease by 826, and an overall decrease for students with disabilities by 254. To me, that's a win. I think that's really good progress. And the types of referrals that we're looking at with students with disabilities is the top 5 here, which we can get off school tools, report this to the state. And you can see there that some of the stuff is definitely geared towards secondary. So when you're looking at cut scheduled class or late to class, those are the types of things that secondary will be looking at. You wouldn't see that in the elementary schools. So those are the types of things that are, of course, going to be written up. We have to make sure we know where our students are. So that makes up a large number of the referrals that you can see aren't really anything you would suspend somebody for, but is very important to document. So that would raise our referrals up. So that makes sense. The percentage of students with disabilities referral by building. When you look at some of this, they look Some of them look great, some of them look not so great. If you look at December for, let's say, Joy, for example, it looks like it's 90%. But when I tease that out, Joy actually had 8 total suspensions. So Joy actually did a great job in December with suspensions. It was very low. It just came up high because 5 of those 8 were students with disabilities. So does that make sense? So some of these percentages, I really think we need to look at the fact that a school like Joy is doing a great job. It has 112 total students with disabilities, but these percentages make it look as if it's very disproportional. Out of 8 students, it is. Does that make sense? Okay. And if you have any questions about any of this, just let me know because I'm going kind of quickly. But that's what I wanted to bring up about the percentages and how it looks. They're actually bringing the numbers very far down. And you look at the total number of students with disabilities in the building, I think they're doing very well. There's a couple of schools I think that we could really focus on and work on based on some of these numbers, but most of them are doing a great job. So the one thing the state is doing, which you might not all be aware of, is that they're calling them now suspensions removals. So sometimes suspensions are necessary, and it's not necessarily a negative thing. It's for safety, it's for kids to get a break, it's for kids in crisis, and they're going to be removed. They're not necessarily called suspension, but the state counts that as the same thing. So I wanted to point that out here. Total, we have 372 suspension removals. For students with disabilities, it's 104. Our percentage rate is 28%, but again, those numbers are a lot lower than they were last year, but their percentage remains about the same, okay? The referral types that resulted in a suspension removal, you can see we're not fooling around. They're not getting suspended for being late to class. Kids are getting suspended for being disruptive. We have physical altercations that result in suspensions, and you can see there, these are real. These are things that kids need to be removed for, and we need to keep our schools safe. So I want to congratulate the buildings on really trying to keep suspensions down using, other avenues besides removing kids from school, but when you look at this kind of thing, this is where we're seeing our suspensions. So, reported to my office, the total numbers. When you look at Bellamy, look at that. That's fantastic. They're doing a great job. So when you look at it just numbers-wise and not percentage-wise, I think you can see what a great job the schools are doing. Like I said, there's a couple of schools that I think we could focus on. They have a little bit higher numbers compared to the total numbers of students with disabilities, and we are focusing there and we're working on those things. So here's one thing I do want to let you guys know. When we look at the state report for suspensions, the state reporting from School Tool, the state only counts a student suspension once. So let's say we have a student who is at Joy. I picked on Joy earlier, I might as well keep going. But once a student is counted as being suspended, they're never counted again. But when the state looks at students with disabilities, they count every time a student is suspended. So there's a little bit of a difference when you're looking at these types of rates, and that's why it can look a little different. So in the 21-22 school year, like I told you, we're under review. I took over at that time. The 22-23 school year, we're under review again because it's too late. We had already happened. So they're looking at the data. I took over, realized there was a problem, took a good look at the data, worked hard across the district, and the 23-24 school year, we are not identified. Okay, so that's a good thing. So when you look across the buildings and the things we've been doing over the past few years and the things that the buildings have put into their school improvement plans, one thing the state wants to see, and we work with the BOCES partnership on this a lot, is positive behavioral intervention and supports, PBIS. You may have heard that from kids coming home. Increased access to mental health providers. That was just gone over with the people before me. Thank you, Amanda. Regular communication and partnerships with families. When I looked at some of the school improvement plans, not everybody has the same strategies that they're trying to use or implementations that we're using across the district because they're new to us and people are trying different things within the culture of their building. But when I looked at it, the buildings that have regular communication and partnerships with family have significant lower numbers of suspensions. So I wanted to point that out. The buildings that do behavioral check-ins, much lower numbers. And I think we need to do training for our staff regarding, like Amanda talked about, restorative justice, trauma-informed care, and our de-escalation techniques. And this year, for the first time, we did a training on de-escalation techniques at the beginning of the year for everybody in the district. And sorry, everybody's throat is dry. My throat's dry too, sorry. So I went over that kind of quickly, but if you have any questions for me, please let me know.
You said in the slide before that some schools are doing much better than others, utilizing certain skill sets that they've developed through their own school.
Yes, and their plans, the school improvement plans.
Well, so my only question would be then, if we see something working very well in a school, do we then try to bring that forward to some other schools, or would that not work because there's just a whole different situation?
For me, For me, absolutely. I think when we're talking about our school improvement plans, this is something new that our district has taken on, and we have a lot of new principals and new administrators here, and so they're working with staff that know their families and know the community of their school, and they're all trying different things. And I think one of the best things I like about doing stuff like this and looking at the data is you do a deep dive and you find out what's working, and then you can say, okay, hey, John DePerno, let's work on this. Hey, Amanda Jones, let's get this in this building, and we can really start spreading it out. This is really new. I mean, we're only 6 months in, and we're already finding out some great data that we can then turn around and spread out.
The only thing I'd like to add with that is that when they actually do these, they get their teams together. So it's a school developed with a team that comes in and they decide what are the things that are going to work for us. What are the things that we've been using? Some schools were already using a lot of the implementation of the restorative practices, and some of them were not there yet. It doesn't mean that they weren't addressing those issues because at that time they put in a system that was working for them. So the beauty of it. The superintendent, Anselm, and I were able to go around and see their initial plans, and those are the ones that are actually published on the website for us. But what's happening now is we're at the midway point, so I'll be going out to the schools, and this is where they have an opportunity to look at and say, hey, we thought that this was going to be a really good, strategy to have, and now we find that the data and what we're seeing is not working. So now they get to pivot, where then I get to offer to them also to say, so-and-so is trying this over in in Bellamy or whatever school it may be, to say, do you think that would fit in here, and what do you think about that? So they have an opportunity to take a look at what's working, what's not working, where they want to change, propose those changes once again, and then I will provide feedback for them to, as we have said, Superintendent Anselm and myself, you can take them all or you can take what's going to work, because it has to work for their school. So the data is showing the differences, but we have to be able to talk that through with them so that they can see those. So it's a really good question and a good point, but I just wanted to add the pieces from the academic side in the process, because she's involved in just one part of her process. So it's the whole puzzle that comes together.
One follow-up to that then, and it's really just for an informative piece for me. So when you talk about disruptive behavior in that, does that also include if they're on a bus? Or do we not have control over when a student's on a bus?
So the bus referrals that come in that actually go to a consequence, those are entered in the school tool. And so they will be counted. Mm-hmm.
Extension of the school.
Yeah, it is.
Yes.
Yes, as long as we receive them, they are handled.
The other thing I'll say about busing is when we send, which we do send kids out to outside placements, BOCES, UCP, House of Good Shepherd, those buses are our property. And when those students, sometimes who are in intense management programs are on those buses, those referrals come to us and may result in some of this stuff. So it's all counted, it's all the same.
Thanks for providing that information. It's helpful to see, and you kind of already answered the first question, but what do you think the result of the lower referrals was from? You mentioned some. If you go back a slide, some of those processes, have all these been implemented? Or you mentioned when you said training, you said we should get training. So have any of that training for staff been
It has
in place
started.
yet?
So I probably misspoke when I said we should continue training, do more training. And when I was saying about this earlier is this sort of stuff that I pulled out of the school improvement plans is this year. Those numbers we were talking about, us being off the list, the work we've done, that's over the last 2 years. So the work has been done, and things are positive that are happening in the schools. For example, Stroud opened up the hub. It's a place for kids to go. They go there to de-escalate. They can go to relax. Gen ed kids can go there. Special ed kids can go there. Anybody can go there. Those are the positive types of things that are going on, try to mitigate some of these things that we wouldn't necessarily see here because that's already been started. So that was a really good question because this can be kind of confusing because I pulled this out of this year's plans, but what we've been doing in special ed has actually been going over 2 years. We're trying to reduce the numbers and come up with other ways to help kids besides suspension.
Thank you. And, you mentioned at the beginning that the data can be misleading, so I don't know if there's any truth to this. I heard it secondhand, but is there any truth to the fact that there may be new rules in the schools, or teachers may be encouraged not to write up a referral as quickly with students in order to bring those numbers down?
That is a great question. I really love that you asked that question because I think that that's sort of one of the things that gets bad press. Referrals have to happen in some instances because you need to make a trail. You need to, like I said, the late to class, you look at the number of referrals, you have to write that up. You have to know where the kid is. You can't just let kids roam all over the school without writing them up, but it doesn't necessarily result in suspension. But it will trigger the building level team to say, hey, we have a lot of late to class. How are we going to address this? And I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought thinking about all the kids late to class. Can you repeat your question? She's saying patterns.
Is there any truth to the fact
I got it. Yes.
How the process of the referral is being communicated from administrators in the building down to the teachers, and is that having any impact on decreasing
It is having an impact, and thank you for bringing me back to that. So as we've trained teachers on some of these restorative practices, trauma-informed care, one example I can think of off the top of my head that happened 2 years ago is we had a student always like to have his hood up in special ed student, and it would really bother the teachers. The rule was you don't have hats on and you don't have your hood up in class. And this student had some sensory issues, felt more comfortable with his hood up. And as we taught teachers, you could see from the first year where he was getting suspended, he was getting referrals, to the next year where people started to understand where he's coming from. He had some trauma in his background. He wanted his hood up, and you don't fight those things. And so those referrals would come down. And you say to yourself, is it better that the student's in class and paying attention with his hood up, or do we want to fight that the student's having his hood up and make a referral? So that's the kind of thing I think that teachers, you will hear, are being encouraged not to write referrals about because there's other ways to help students. Does a referral help a student feel more comfortable and safe without his hood on? No. So some of the referrals are necessary. We have to track things. We have to look at those. Some aren't. And so you may hear that teachers are being asked not to write referrals. I wouldn't put it that way. I would say they're being educated about what is an appropriate referral and what isn't, and what can you handle in class, and what do you have to put up the chain.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for listening, and thanks for your time.
Oops. All right, moving on to our consent agenda. Resolution to accept consent agenda, that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the consent agenda be accepted by the Board of Education. I move the resolution. Second by Kirsten. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes. We will move to page 8 in our agenda, and Sue will lead it off with finance.
Finance had a committee meeting last week, and some of the things we discussed during our committee meeting, which were very positive, I felt, were the fact that as we look at where we are 6 months into the year, 7 months into the school year now, we looked at what our costs are versus what the budget was. And some of the items that were brought out as looking at was that we might be over budget on were some of the overtime in our maintenance department, which then, as was explained by Dr. Gonzalez, was that maintenance had, in the beginning of the year, they got hit with the tornado, so they had some overtime costs there. And now that we've had this winter with snow, all of this has come forward now, affecting that area. So there was quite a few areas that we went through and talked about, but for me, the biggest part of everything is halfway through the school year where you've had all your costs encumbered, so your expenses are within the report that we looked at against our budget. We are only at 86% spent of our budget. So that what that means is we have a portion of our budget that we're not utilizing, which shows we're doing an excellent job of curbing costs as we're going forward. And now you have an extra 5 months going into this year to continue that process and continue saving monies wherever you can. So I would like to really compliment and thank the business department because they've done an exceptional job of watching that for us going forward. The other part that we talked about was we do have an outside auditing firm coming in to do, they do risk assessment every year, and they are coming within the next 2 weeks, and they're looking at the HR and payroll department. Every year they pick a portion of the district to look at that's considered a risk, and that's what we chose last year, so they're coming in to look at that. And we'll have a update on that in March when we have an audit meeting. Our next Finance Committee meeting will be on February 27th at 3:30, and we're going to be continuing to go through the budget process and where we are moving forward and how that's going along. Right now, they have been meeting with administrative teams and looking at what we need to spend versus what we actually need to spend versus what people would like to spend, and critiquing all that. So we are also, the last thing that we did talk about was our computer system, our accounting system is called WinCap, and we're looking at, we only right now utilize certain modules of it. What we are looking at doing is purchasing more of the modules to help alleviate, it would alleviate man work, cumbersome man work, if you can put things into a computerized system. So we're looking to see what the cost of that might be, which would help as we go forward again, being able to analyze our costs versus our budgets. So that is the Finance Committee report.
Great. Thank you, Sue. We have no agenda items for educational programs, and on to human resources. I will lead it off with action item number 1. Resolution to accept retirement. Resolve that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education hereby accepts with regret the retirement of the following individuals. Carla Carletta, Office Specialist, Rome Free Academy, effective August 30th, 2025. I move the resolution. Second by Kirsten. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, resolution passes, and congratulations, Ms. Carlotta. Action item number 2, resolution to accept affiliation agreement. Resolve that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education hereby accepts the affiliation agreement between the Rome City School District and State University of New York at Oswego. I move the resolution.
Second.
Second by Sue. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes. Action item number 3, resolution to accept settlement agreement. Resolve that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education hereby accepts a settlement agreement between the Rome City School District and Rome Teachers Association and a tenured teacher. I move the resolution. Second by John. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes. Resolution, action item number 4, resolution to accept minimum wage increase. Whereas the state of New York has enacted legislation mandating an increase in the minimum wage of $15.50 effective December 30th, 2024. And whereas the Rome City School District Board of Education is committed to complying with all applicable federal, state, and local labor laws, including ensuring equitable and fair compensation for all employees. And whereas the proposed wage increase affects certain hourly employees of the district, and whereas the financial implications of the wage increase have been reviewed and accounted for within the district's current budget planning. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Rome City School District hereby approves compliance with the New York State minimum wage increase effective December 30th, 2024 for all applicable district employees. And be it further resolved that the superintendent of schools or designee is directed to take all necessary actions to implement this resolution, including but not limited to adjustments in payroll systems, employee notifications, and updates to the district policies as needed. I move the resolution. Second by Paula. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes. And on to Mr. Jeff DeMattis for policy.
Action item number 1, resolution to accept the second reading and adoption of policies. Resolved that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the second reading and adoption of the following policies as outlined on page 10. I move the resolution.
Seconded by Kirsten. Any discussion? I do just have one question as it relates to the textbook selection and adoption. Just from a more operational perspective, so the policy does say that the district is responsible for approving textbook selection. So I was just curious, since I have yet on my tenure to have this happen, just curious from an educational perspective what that process actually looks like and what is the board's responsibility.
Our assistant superintendent left the room, but here's what I would say in terms of what she shared with me. There is a process in-house that we go through. We involve multiple stakeholders if there's a new textbook, and then after that we give you the list so that you can approve it. But
So we haven't had any done.
I don't believe so. Most of the time, a lot of things are done through technology now, but if there is a textbook adoption, it would go through the internal process, and obviously working with the teachers union, et cetera, making sure that they are approved before we brought them here for your approval. So,
Yeah, that question came up in the meeting.
Oh, you should answer it for us then.
Well, I didn't know it as well as she did.
Oh. All right. Any other questions or discussion? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes.
And the next meeting is Wednesday, February 5th, so we just continue the first Wednesday of the month here at this, or in the building here at 4:15.
Thanks, Jeff. We have no miscellaneous business, and we are going to move on to our discussion items, starting with the long-term planning capital improvement project.
I am going to yield the floor to our Director of Business, along with our architect and CNS, for some of the follow-ups you had asked for in terms of analysis.
Good evening. Tonight we're going to discuss some of the questions that you had asked at our previous meeting. Before I do that, there were a couple of things that came up over the last 2 weeks as we've been meeting together as a team. The first was the question about whether or not RCS was even going to still be an option. It is currently under contract, but I have had a conversation with the broker. At this time, the potential buyer has until the end of this week to make a final decision. If not, they either need to close the contract or they need to request an extension of that contract. When I spoke with the broker, they did indicate to me that the diocese would prefer that the district do move forward with the process versus the potential buyer that they have, and they are willing to take second bids in this process, even if the potential buyer moves forward with an extension in the contract. So at this time, I would say they are not off the table, but we will want to move forward with a decision in the next couple of weeks to be able to move forward with RCS if that's the option you choose.
Can I add something?
Absolutely.
We also made sure that we called the diocese in Syracuse office today, left them a message. I'm looking forward to speaking with them to let them know that the board will be considering RCS as an option. And obviously, we need more time to make a decision, and that won't happen until February, so that we still have an interest. So we left a message for them today. Looking forward to speaking with them soon.
Thank you. The other thing that we found out through a meeting last week with CNS and Labella is that when Stadium Support had the old building on it and it was demolished, a lot of that rubble was actually buried in that space. So without knowing exactly what is buried under there, and Damien can correct me if I'm wrong, but we kind of estimated between 7 and 10 million is the potential to be able to dig out some of that foundation, which was not part of those original costs. So we just want to make sure that you have all the information as you're moving into this process, because it was something that I was not aware of, and I'm not sure that everyone at that table was aware of. So I wanted to bring it to your attention. So I'm going to let Craig come in and do his thing.
Good evening. Does anybody need to stand up, stretch, jog in place? Are you good? It's a busy night. Again, I'm Craig with Labella. I left you some gifts. You'll see that there's two handouts. One is a small one and one is a big one. The big one we're going to go through a little bit. We're going to summarize. I'm going to try to go through it, but the intent was to leave you with something you can dig into a little bit, do some research, write down questions, whatever you need. If you do have questions, please file them through to the superintendent, and we'll be able to respond to those the next time we meet. Okay. First and foremost, this is nothing that is in concrete. I want to stress that what we did is based on kind of the charge from the last meeting was to go out and get more data and more considerations of different grade configurations and what that would look like in the district. So I'm going to get into some of the details of that. But I wanted to really stress that this is a space study. It is not something that has scope, budget, schedules that have really been implemented. That's a few steps down the road from now, okay? The main purpose of this is to give you data and an understanding of the utilization of space within the district and what some options might look like if you chose to go down those roads, okay? Any questions so far before I dig into this? Is it good? No?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, I'll just bring it to me. There we go. There we go. I apologize. All right.
We're not squealing this week. You're good.
Okay. If you take out this handout, I'm going to probably be talking from this. Yeah, to begin with. And I want to start with the right side of the page one. The district from the last board meeting really went to work collecting data for us to be able to use in the development of space utilization within these building structures. So it's been a key tool, and you'll see in the bigger handout there's some spreadsheets, and we'll talk about it a little bit as we go through, but I'll help you understand how we kind of interpolated the data into what we used for planning purposes. Primarily, we looked at the existing grade population for kindergarten through 6th grade, so 7 grades. And currently the K-6 population is about almost 3,000, 2,900 students. So we took the 2,900 students and divided it by 7, and we came up with an average class size of 414. And from that, we added a 5% growth factor because we want to be able to create a buffer in this. Now, this isn't rocket science as far as, accuracy and some of the things you can do for population studies, but it was a good tool to at least give us an idea of how, if we wanted to treat the district equitably and balance the district and the classes structures among all the buildings, what we needed to work with. So to that table, you had the 5% growth, which is approximately 435 per grade. We applied that to the pre-K level as well. Okay, again, that was an assumption just to help us in developing these strategies for these scopes. The middle orange column is the contract. Okay, so you have a contractual obligation with your teachers of the maximum class size that they will have. Okay, the contractual size limits are for PK is a maximum of 24-year-olds per class. Usually that requires 2 staff. K through 2 is 22 students per class. 3 through 6 is 24, and 7 through 12 is 30. So from that, we were able to say, for example, the pre-K, 435 students. Divide that by the 20 max for a fully utilized pre-K program, and then we come up with 22 classrooms that are needed. Okay.
So is that what the SED is the number of classrooms?
Well, SED is the other. Yeah. No, that's okay. Yep.
He's not in the chart yet.
Oh, I apologize. I'm looking at okay.
So the SED is similar. They have in their planning guides maximum class size requirements for the different grades. PK is 20, K through 6 is 27, and 7 through 12 is 30. Okay? If you were limited to SED's requirements, you would have a total of 135 classrooms you would need for PK through 6. But because you have a contractual obligation to your employees, that trumps the New York State Ed Department standard, and you need 154 classrooms. Okay, because you got fewer kids, you're going to need more rooms. Okay, so that's kind of the basis we did through all these scenarios, is looking at balancing the number of classrooms by grade based on their contractual obligations. Any questions so far?
The K6 SED is 27. Is that correct? Are we sure?
Yes. I pulled that off their website. I have their planning guide with me if you want to browse through it.
We have situations where it's been more than 27, so I don't.
That's why they get paid more per class, right?
Because of New York State, I understand the contractual class size limit. I get that. I understand how that works, and then if you add someone else in or have to pay more. But the class size limit from SED, because we were told before it was 30. I mean,
It's 30 for grades 7 through 12.
right, that's not what we had heard previously. Cassie, I mean, am I correct? We said it was 30. So what happens when, what are the consequences when the SED class size right now? I mean, last year, my son was in a class of 28. So what does that look like? Because I will tell you, I was 100% told it was 30. That was that 30 was our magic number. So this is really the first time I've heard that it was definitely 27. So what is the consequence for that, for our school district? Do you get, what does that look like?
We know we're not in compliance.
So really, there's there's no consequence to it. What it is it's just an estimate. It's a guideline to help schools determine how many students they should have in a class. So like downstate, you'll find schools that have 35 students to a classroom. There's no consequence to it. It's just to help you build a guide. And in our situation, because we're building a new building, is to help us determine how many classrooms we need. So there's no bad thing that happens from it. It's just to help guide us. And in our situation, we actually have the opposite issue where our contract requires us to have less students. So in our sense, it's really not so much a bad consequence as it is that we actually have to worry about more classrooms because we need less students in our space. Does that make sense?
Right. Or we have to pay
The extra, yes.
Right. But to the contract, we want to make sure that if we're building a space, that we're building a space that will eliminate or at least reduce that as much as possible. So we're basing this on, if we had to pick between the contract or SED, you have to go with whatever the smaller numbers are, which means we're going to have more classrooms. So if you had a contract, for instance, that was 35 students in a space, which I know will not likely ever happen, then we would still go with the SED recommendation of 30.
And the goal is to always to try to be in compliance with the guidelines that are provided for you by New York State. 27 kids or 28 kids in a K-6 classroom, we know sometimes it's not conducive.
Mm-hmm.
And so we want to stay within the guidelines as much as possible. So we like to be in compliance with what SED is requiring.
Yeah. So two things to that point. The first one is this is a planning guide that the state has come up with for determining class sizes. Okay. Like you said, if, for example, you had 35 kids in a room, they may require you to have a bigger room for that versus the standard size of rooms that would be for 30 kids. Okay. The other side of that is when you submit any project that's requiring additions or new construction, they're going to look at the number of classrooms and they're going to use their number, which could be 30 or 27, whatever it is, depending on the grade structure. And they're going to say, you don't need 3 or 4 of these classrooms. That's when you come back and say, but we have contractual obligations with our employees and we are required to do this. And then they go, oh, okay. So then they can calculate based on the requirements of the district versus what their manual is telling them. Okay? All right. Anything else before you good? Okay. Excuse me. Some of the things that came out of the district's evaluation of the data is capping of some of the grades within the elementary schools. If you're not familiar with capping, it basically means you're at the max in that room and they're not letting any more kids into it. I had the example in my home where our class was capped and my other son, in that grade, had to go to a different building and didn't ride the bus with his other brother. So it's troublesome to me to think of capping as far as it could divide families and require a lot of additional efforts on parents to make sure if they have pickups or things like that, that they have to coordinate now with 2 buildings versus their home school. So Denty has a current capped grade at 4, grade 4. Gainsvort is kindergarten, 3rd and 4th. John Joy is grade 4. Ridge Mills is at grades 1 and 6. And one building had capping on the verge, and that's Ridge Mills, with grades kindergarten, 3rd and 5th. So when we evaluated these schemes, we kind of geared everything towards, we wanted to have dedicated art space, we wanted dedicated music, we wanted to make sure the special ed classrooms and things were properly sized versus being in a closet somewhere. So those were taken into consideration with all these scenarios that we were going to present. All the kindergarten or the lower grades, the PK3, PK4, or PK6 options have pre-K in those facilities. So all the facilities that are listed on here for scenarios 1 and 3 will have pre-K in it. And just to make sure I'm not confusing, anything like in scenario 1 and 2, which is a 4-6 and a 5-6, though they will not have pre-K in those buildings. Those are purely those upper levels. Okay. We also took into account, every environment that we're looking at is trying to be learning centered and really looking at being considerate to what the teacher needs for spaces. So even though we didn't get into scope, we tried to look at something. You'll see we group grades together. Some districts choose to scatter the grades We went with that approach just because of the support systems the grades can have, of likeness, keeping the kids that are in those grades together. That is something, again, down the road, depending on what direction you go to, we'll dig into a little bit more detail with that. Basically, every building will have some form of alteration required, especially since we're moving pre-K into these buildings. There will be a need for toilet facilities within those rooms. You'll see in some of the schemes, we're kind of melding rooms because of the size to provide a properly sized pre-K room. And so that all plays into the part of how many rooms you may need, if you have excess or if you have a need for addition. So there will be, in some of these scenarios, you'll have additions. The one scenario, you'll have some floating spaces, which you'll have a little, inventory to pivot to different programs. But I think every building will have some form of alterations required for those different grades. Okay?
Excuse me, I just have one quick question on that.
Yes.
Is that a state requirement that a bathroom be in the pre-K?
Correct.
So are we not in compliance with that now?
These rooms have bathrooms in them.
You do? Oh, okay. Thanks.
Yeah. Yes, kindergarten does too. Okay. So the report I provided is broken down into the following. So we have a summary of the existing program and population distributions for grades PK through 6. Scenario 1 is PK through 3 and a 4-6 facility. Scenario 2 is a PK 4. Yes.
Can you go into details about scenario 1? If we had a PK3 and a 4-6 distribution, will number 1, fits all of the students that we're talking about, and will it provide us with all of these things that we talked about in terms of long range and equitable outcome for all students? So if you can take every scenario and go into a little bit more details, and also some of the scope of alterations that needs to be done, and whether it will provide us with the long-term plan of creating space to fit in all of these other things that we mentioned.
Okay, so maybe it'd be best if I just kind of peruse through the big packet. Yeah. See. So in there, I provided kind of a sample sheet to just tell you how to read these sheets. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of data that you can look at. The colors are hopefully going to help you understand how the grade distributions are in the buildings. There's a table that kind of shows the breakdown of the grade structures and the number of classrooms that are being used for that purpose. So you'll be able to read through those and kind of get a grasp. So this is the existing Bellamy program distribution. So we'll go through the existing ones of the facilities. So this is the spreadsheet. On the left side is the data. This is only a small portion of everything that the district was able to put together for us, but this is kind of the key points that we went through because it shows all the number of classrooms required and the population in those rooms, depending on if it was special ed, pre-K, and then all the way through 6th grade. And then on the right is a table you will see on the drawings, which is basically depicting that data in kind of a building by building format instead of a grade by grade format.
Craig, when we were meeting, you had a great overview for me, and I think that would help the board to have more of the scenarios. So in that first scenario, give them a sense of, okay, if we had the PK3 configuration and the 4-6 configuration, kind of like give them a brief summary or synopsis of what you had here.
Sure.
Will that take care of all of the students? Will it provide us the opportunity to get the PK3? What are the alterations? And will we stay within that budget? Like those things that you had here, you briefly went through.
Yes, thank you. So scenario 1, which was the PK3 4-6 distribution, provides for all those programs that I mentioned earlier. So you have all your specials, you have pre-K classrooms. There will be renovations required for those. And then, depending on which the facility is, you could have a total of about 12 what I call floating spaces. So there's inventory of extra rooms that are not necessarily designated for anything special at almost each of the buildings except the 4 through 6. Okay. So that allows you to basically either pivot different needs. If you need a different resource room for a certain year, there's a little bit of a growth in a specific grade level. It allows you a lot of flexibility within those facilities. But no additions, and really the renovation costs are minimal to that. Scenario 2, with the PK4 scheme, actually results in needing about 15 classroom additions throughout the district in the elementary levels. Okay. Again, all those specials and programs are accounted for, as well as the PK. Scenario 3, which is making all the facilities a PK6, so basically bringing cloth into the PK6 online. Separate from cloth, you're looking at adding approximately 17 classrooms, and you will have probably 3 or 4 floating classrooms scattered among the district.
Before we move on from that one, just from, we've talked a lot about our lines, our catchment zones, are they accurate? But I'm getting the sense as we move with higher capacity in the building, keeping things like 5, 6, or keeping it a PK through 6, how drastic would the lines have to be? Because I'm just thinking, like, the first page I opened up here is Gansevoort. It's landlocked. We're already 3 stories up, so there's really not much. So, and I know probably you don't know where the lines would fit, but like, how drastic do current catchment zones change as we keep more grades in the building?
I can tell you that I went building by building to try to keep within the confines of the building limitations and the property limitations, to not have a huge impact. So it's not like we're adding a need for 20 classrooms at Gansevoort that we have nowhere to put them. So I tried to stay within the original population counts to figure that we're trying to stay away from looking at redistricting or having that discussion yet until we actually figure out what the utilization of these spaces are. And I think we tried to balance the best we can, but there's definitely going to be part of the conversation, again, down the road where we'll have to, see how things are encountered. Yes.
So just to help with that explanation, if you move forward with a K6 type space, you will definitely have to change catchment areas pretty drastically. If you move forward with a 4-6 building, the catchment areas will stay more or less the same because we're not going to be changing the number of students in that area. We're going to be taking all the 4th through 6th grade across the district and moving them to one location. So if you're really looking at what that does for your boundaries in terms of catchment, that's why we would be recommending a 4th through 6th grade.
Similar to what you're doing now with Stroud.
That's with pre-K going in the schools, though. So that's the one thing, and I'm not saying that they shouldn't go into schools, but that's moving pre-K into all of our elementary schools, and if we're definitely, that's the direction we're going in, that they're all definitely going. Now, the only question I have is, we had talked about down the road, is that where, the state will go, that all pre-Ks, all universal and how it works, or does busing come back in play? So I want to just slow up with that one thing, because when we talk about a K6, even if we put the K6 at Clough, or, well, no, because pre-K is here. If we put K6 somewhere else, it would alleviate if we had a new school. I'm not saying that we shouldn't, but it's not that pre-K has to go into every single school. That's something we have to discuss. So I keep getting stuck with, we're picking a site, but then to pick a site, we have to already have the configuration. So that's where I'm processing at all. It's got to be a together type of decision, because you can't pick the site without the configuration, because you can pick a site that's K6 without putting pre-K into it. You can do that. Then Gansevoort, when you talk about redistricting, and you talk about, okay, well, where are you redistricting? And well, one, the 5-6 that we had said before, and I'm not saying that that's the answer, but we had decided on the 5-6, I think, was with you guys, right? I mean, we're using the same. It was the ballot, right?
Yes.
So that's where I'm processing too. We already went through this, and we had come to the same agreement with, okay, 5-6, okay, it's gonna go on that site. So now it's hard for me too to hear, okay, well, we have all this buried underneath. Well, why didn't we know it was buried underneath 3 years ago when we said that this is what we're gonna go with? And then Craig, I have to tell you, you just made a comment that you said my son got capped. I don't know where he went to school, and it was terrible for your family to go in 2 different directions. And then I'm like, well, that's what's gonna happen if we go 4 to 6. I mean, you just gave a scenario that could be the same thing if your son was in 4th. So that's all. Well, I think we just have to, we keep saying pick a site and then decide. I don't know if that's the
And that was not the recommendation. I think we have to do 2 things. The first, and that's why we made those 2 recommendations, we have to pick a location, and we have to be settled on the configuration, because that's how we're going to do the design. You did bring up that whole idea of a K6. Even when we go to a K6, here's what the K6, I've indicated that here. The reality is you're opening a building in order to reduce space issues that we currently have at all of the K6s. In some of the buildings, it's more of a bigger issue. In others, they're struggling right now, right? Whereas some other buildings are like, when we have people providing support in the hallways, that's not okay. What you're going to have, and I think I've communicated that, is that once you open up a K6 students have to move from their current catchment area. So that's when we're talking about a redistricting. And I know for a fact that when you start talking about moving some people from their catchment area in order to attend school in that building, whether you're moving 50 people from each catchment to go into that building, no one is not going to move, because people are always constantly thinking about, how will I be impacted, period. So we can do it, as I said it before, we can do anything that the board desires for us to do, and we will work hard. But you're talking about individuals who are married and really want to stay in the catchment area. So we thought the best scenario, without redistricting the whole the whole district, is to be able to provide K3 within your current attendance area. So if you live in Ridge Mills, your children at K3 goes to Ridge Mill. But when it comes to 4, 5, 6, they can all move under one umbrella. So that's what we were talking about. Yes.
And I understand that.
Yeah.
Wherever you go to school, though, in 4th grade, you're moving somewhere else. So that's the move too. So it's uncomfortable. I understand.
Mm-hmm.
My train of thought as I keep going back is that now I know we just said we have, and I know we talk about space and different things, but here's the option, and to tease it out, and now we have debris underneath land.
Mm-hmm.
We removed Fort Stanwix a long time ago. If you look at the lines, where we're having issues is where the line is on Pine Street, and it comes up and it pushes. We are missing another city school. The city school is where it used to be. Well, it would probably be Fort Stanwix, and that's why I keep going back to the space we already have. Then you're pushing down. So I almost, and let me just finish my thought, Cassie. I know, and I've spoken to people too, and myself, and I'm not on any social media, so everything I'm hearing and thinking is from what we've already discussed years ago. It has nothing to do with influence on any social media. I've read nothing. If I was to choose, and many families in our community would rather choose to stay where their neighbors are all going to school too from K to 6, and if I had to, and it would affect me. I have a child who goes to Ridge Mills. If I don't have to go to my home school, but I'm still going to go to a school where all my neighbors are going to be, I'd rather do that than move and go somewhere else. So I'm not saying that that's the answer. I just need us to tease through all of that. Now, if we're saying that the state is saying that pre-K should be in schools, and I get the reasoning behind it, and the reason why it should, and it looks like that, but I just keep going back to that, and I keep going back, and I want us to think about those pieces, and everything I see is the pre-K here, the scenarios. And then the other piece is that I keep going back to, which I don't see, and I know we talked about, when we talk about cost in Rome Catholic, just pulling the 6th grade. And I'm not saying that's the long term. I understand that. I do worry about money and affording it. And I know, I've talked to some other board members on how to do that. I just want us to tease out some of these things. And I don't feel comfortable with that. If I had to choose, I would choose a community school and moving some lines.
Right, because
rather than going the 4-6 model.
Well, I think the thing I would say to counter is I grew up in Rome, and when I was in elementary school at Stokes, we still had music and art on a cart. We did music on stage. Our art teacher was literally in a closet. So this is, and I'm not, the youngest book, but this is systemic. And we still had DeWitt was open, Fort Stanwix was open. So yes, we've closed schools, but this is and I think of the teachers that have to go to school and work in a closet. So I personally think that a K-6, I don't ever see how we get people that need to teach children in classrooms and dedicated spaces, people that are not trying to do supported services in hallways. We're going to have to do something that is not what this community is used to give every kid and every staff member the space they need to educate our kids. And I don't see, based on anything that we've seen previously or this, where a K-6 could be big enough to draw out that many people to make the space.
Now, I agree with what you're saying also, but we have to be fair and here's the elephant I'm going to give you in the room here. None of your districts have ever been redistricted as much as my district. If you're to look at who's been redistricted the most, my neighborhood has been 4 times in my children's career. No lines have been changed when we lose these schools. So, and this is nothing personal at all, because guess what? I had special permission. My kids didn't have to move because of that, because I couldn't take that anymore. But having children 10 years apart, my area has been redistricted the most of anyone in this entire city. And I don't think it's fair. We have to look at the big picture here, because you know what? At the end of the day, it shouldn't matter where your children are going to school, because every school in this district is the same. We'll go back to, again, yes, and you know what? If it came down to a cart going in there and kids could stay where they were, yes, I agree with you. I don't want to see anyone doing that for music. I don't want to see those things. But at the end of the day, too, I think we need to be fair at things and say, I would love to see K through 6 stay, and I think I wish it could. If that doesn't work, and you know what, and this may be off the table, I don't even know, and I don't want to see things change for me, but here's an idea. If this building already has pre-K in it, and I understand that it's starting to go into, but for money reasons and everything, if there's bathrooms already here, if we kept pre-K here, and somehow secluded it. These kids aren't going to bust their walls to get to, if we had to put a 5, 6 or a different grade level, could we do it here and separate that pre-K away from the older kids and still have this building here that works?
I want to respond to the 5, 6. I know that was a recommendation that was made before. And so we also engaged the building principals in that conversation because we also wanted to get their thoughts. And so we asked them, if you had your choice of reconfiguration, what would you do? So they offered some thoughts. And then we posed question number 2. If we only remove 6th grade, think about your building right now and what you don't have in terms of space. So what,
5, 6.
I know, I'm going to start with the annex because the 6th grade academy we took into consideration as well. Because if I had an opportunity to have a building that meet SED requirement so I can remove 6th grade right now, I would do that for September. Right? Because the reality is we have an issue that frankly, when I go to sleep at night, it's impossible for me to not think about these students and the teachers who are teaching in hallways. So we talked about that. We said, okay, let's talk about your buildings right now. If we just remove 6th grade, would that give you the opportunity to make sure that all of those special area teachers in art or music have enough room, or would it free up the classrooms that you need to be able to do all of the things that we should be implementing with integrity? The answer was no. Then we said, well, let's think about 5 and 6. Think about the number of classrooms. So if you go and you look at the sections of each building, the section in Joy for 5 and 6, and if you remove that completely, 5 and 6, we said, okay, would you have space issues that are still tight? What was the answer, team?
Yes, you would still have tight
That
space.
it still doesn't give you the space that we need, even if we retrieved 5 and 6. Now, we're not totally married to, we can still leave pre-K on the side, but even if you remove 5, 6 out of the building only, it still doesn't give them the space that they need.
And maybe I'm missing a portion of this. I'm missing something. If you're going to add pre-K in, right? And take 5, 6 out, okay? No, I'm just saying 5, 6 out, okay? There should be, you know what I'm saying? Or if you left pre-K out, you're at 2. Then you're putting 4, 5, 6. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm missing something, maybe.
No, so, just to focus on this, I guess, this problem that was presented. The intent in doing this population grade distribution was to focus on what if we brought pre-K into all the buildings, okay? And what if we were providing the proper spaces we needed for the other programs, like the specials we talked about, as well as resource, special ed, those types of things. So yes, we're taking 5, 6 out, but I need to take 4 classrooms of normal size and turn them into 2 pre-K classrooms. So you lose those off of the extra space you were getting. And then there's some special ed rooms that were very undersized that shouldn't be occupied for the most purposes. You're providing a couple resource special ed rooms, so that takes it off. Plus, some of the buildings had music and art spaces, but some of them didn't. So now we're saying we're going to budget for those spaces to have, again, a dedicated space.
Gotcha.
So that was kind of the math.
My only considered thing is if you're saying that you're going to put pre-K in every single building, you're talking about plumbing and bathrooms, putting in a classroom for every single, that just seems like when we have something here and I'm just throwing, I don't have either way at this point right now. I'm so far, don't even know which way I want to go, but I'm just saying those are just my thoughts as like someone that's going to say, if the facilities are here and they're available here, we're going to put them in every single school that's existing already. Well, that's a lot of money, and that's not simple things. That's major, isn't that major construction?
Yeah, there would be construction. Some of the buildings already have those rooms in some of the lower grades. So some of the kindergarten, primary grades, first and second, have some of those because that was kind of the practice when those buildings were. But I'm not going to lie to you, until we get to that next level of actually, okay, this is the direction the board has given us, we'll dig in and see what the other impacts are. And you have to tell us what is your driving purpose in this. Is it to make sure we're not going through a growth spurt and dealing with oversized capacity classrooms? What is the best scheme that works for us? How do the families and the children respond through that? That's kind of the information we need from you so that this big packet can become more of a reality, and we can start putting some numbers to things of, okay, yeah, we're going to have, because of the building condition survey, we're going to still be doing construction work in these buildings, every 3 to 5 years, right? So, it's not an issue for us to say we're going to add 4, single stall toilet rooms in these rooms for the grade level that's going to be using them. Price on those, we could get you that type of information, but until you give us kind of this is what we want. We don't want pre-K in all of them, or we want pre-K in all of them.
I guess one thing I would like to say is about the pre-K, everybody can't attend pre-K right now because they don't have busing here. So by putting pre-K into elementary schools, then you're able to service a much wider population. And any study you look at tells you over and over, pre-K is your building ground for every single thing coming after that.
You got to start at home too at one point. We can't put every kid in pre-K.
But
you know what it's going to cost?
Okay, can I just finish though now? Mine? So that's the way I'm looking at it, and this is only my own looking at it, is I don't want to focus on the past. And we have focused on the past. Here we have an opportunity to focus on something for the future. And the only way I can look at it, focusing on the future, is to look at what is the best educational forum going forward. And to me, bringing pre-K into the elementary schools is absolutely a building block that we don't have presently. It puts all of our other services, as we talked about, the art on the cart and all those things, giving them space if we do pre-K to 3. And I have gone out and talked to many retired teachers. I've talked to current teachers. They have all told me the exact same thing. They have never collaborated. A first or second grade teacher has never collaborated with a 4th grade teacher on an educational component. K through 3 is one column of education. 4 through 6 is another column of education. Those are the groups that collaborate with each other. So for me, and again, I'm looking forward, not back. Kelly, when you talk about Fort Stanwix, it was closed how many years ago? Even after Staley got flooded in 2021, a lot of those kids got redistricted.
Look at how many times they've been redistricted, though.
And I understand that. And all those kids are out of that system now, Kirsten.
No, they're not, because my kid's back in it, because she went to both of them.
No, I'm saying.
My one child has gone to Fort Stanwix, she's gone back to another school,
She's saying she's in high school.
I'm saying she's in high school. Okay, I'm saying that's, again, in the past. I'm looking forward. We're putting a lot of money into our community, into a school that's going to bring, and you can keep saying it, but Rome is growing. There's things coming here that we all have to think about. Rome is a growing place. We're not like a lot of surrounding districts whose enrollment numbers have stayed perfectly stagnant or fallen. And you can tell it by looking at foundation aid that's given out. So what I'm saying is a new school and I liked when I was concerned, when people said they were concerned about doing a 4 through 6 building because they called it a mega school. If you go to any other large city around us, there's 400 kids in a class. My granddaughter in Charlotte graduated with 980 kids in her class. And all I'm trying to say is the concept that our superintendent brought to us, which was having a wing for 4th grade, a wing for 5th grade, and a wing for 6th grade, keeps the grade level separated, but yet brings them into a building where you can have combination band groups, things that you can combine together that brings a value to the student and brings a value to teaching staff. And if you look forward, that's what the education component is going to be. Our biggest problem has been sixth graders. So now you have a group that are all together instead of being in 6 different elementary schools at a time in their life when their hormones are starting to kick in, social media kicks even stronger. They have a collaboration where they're all together and they're not fighting it. So again, it's only my own opinion. I've been criticized because people say I don't have any kids in the school right now, so I have no emotional element to it. And they're right. I don't have an emotional tie to my own child being here or my grandchild being here. But that doesn't mean I can't look at what we have right now and look to what the future might bring to us if we think long term. And yes, it is a cost. It is. But you also take that cost and you spread it out over, you buy a home, what do? You have a mortgage. You build a new school, you go out and you bond for it. It's spread out over a large number of years. And now we have the opportunity where you have time, and we talked about it in our finance meeting. You have time now to start setting money aside each year towards what your costs will be. So I feel very confident. We have a group of administrators who we can trust. You have a group of administrators who brought you data. It's not something they're just pulling out of a hat, as has been said. They've done a lot of research for it. And again, that's only mine. And I understand other people have different opinions, but I can't, in my good faith, working in the community, talking to people, being on the Rome Chamber Board, listening to businesses talk, our local businesses, many of them have talked about very favorable about it, going to a different model. And again, my thing is we all need to have our schools as this equitable. You build a brand new K through 6 building, you have one group of people now who has a brand new building with all brand new things. What about all of our other elementary schools?
Every other area where you're missing that point is that they have a neighborhood school.
They still will.
They still will.
No, you guys all have neighborhoods. My child would, no one in those neighborhoods have a school. That's where you're not.
I'm saying going forward, everyone would, because they'd have
That's the only thing I think a lot of people want to see. Like you're saying, we've lost the neighborhood school thing. And if that's the case, that is fine. But it's fine for everybody, is what I'm saying. So if you don't have to have a neighborhood school for one area, then the whole I'm just fighting both sides of this. Then redistricting shouldn't matter where you go to school. Shouldn't matter. We're making a big issue that you're saying we can't redistrict, but you're saying that it's okay for one area to just not have a neighborhood school. Then you guys don't need, this area doesn't need a neighborhood school either. Put them all on a bus. Make them redistrict the area for the thing. Do you see what I'm saying? This is
Every school has a catchment zone. So what are you saying?
The catchment zone changes,
Hold on, Kirsten.
though. And it's,
as of today,
okay,
we have catchment zones that have been in place for a few years. So what are you saying?
The catchment zone is a lesser of an area. If you're trying to say area school-wise, the schooling is different.
But what I'm really trying to understand, what is it? Is it that people can't walk there?
No, you can't walk to any school from certain areas.
So just help me understand, because I'm not understanding.
All right, I'm going to say, and I'm going to use Kelly, because you know what? She won't take me personally. I don't want, okay? We have to move this area, this catchment zone now, right now. If you told her that she had to move to Gansevoort, her kids all have to go to Gansevoort now, okay? Because of, however we have to do this because of the grade levels, okay? There's gonna be an uproar because they have to go to Gansevoort. Or right. Joy, I'm not even gonna say Gansevoort, I'm gonna say Joy, okay? You know what I'm saying? You're saying because if we do this 4 through 6, we're saying that, if we kept, K through 6, we're saying that redistricting and everyone's gonna be in an uproar, okay? But why? What's if we're saying that the schools are all the same and we're trying to give them what they want, why is everyone going to be in an uproar? If this is what we're hearing from the public that they all want, this I'm just playing devil's advocate. We all are hearing out there they want K through 6, okay? So we give them the schooling, the K through 6. Here you go. Now you've got to be redistricted. You can't have it all. We can't have it. I'm not saying you, I'm not saying her or him. I'm just playing devil's advocate here because the public is saying, and for the most part, they want K through 6. Okay, so we're going to give you K through 6. It shouldn't matter where your kids are going to school then, right?
Well, and the
see what
comment
I'm saying?
Yes, you and I got you now.
Thank you. I wasn't trying to put it as...
No, I thought you were flipping.
No.
I thought you were telling the reverse.
No,
but I think
no.
What I will say again, and I have said before, the person I was sitting on this board 3 years ago, I am very different because I am not from education. I have no education in education. I am an expert of project management. That is my job, that's my career. But as I have sat on this board and I have understand what New York State is asking, I have certainly understand the multitude and massive nature of what it takes to run a school district, which, you know, Jen and I joke all the time, like, oh my God, like corporate world is just so very different. The way we get revenue is different, all of it. So while I completely, wholeheartedly appreciate the community's opinions, it's their children, our job sitting on this board is to think about every child in the district.
Right.
And rely on the people that we have put it in this district to run it, our CEO, our CFO, our curriculum folks, to give us their opinion on what is the best outcome for every child. I personally cannot go against, because I am not a subject matter expert, I have no say in the game of how to run a classroom. If this is what Superintendent Anselm is saying, this is the best outcome for our district, both present, future's grandkids, I will be hard pressed to go against it.
Can I add my 2 cents? It's probably going to be a little bit more than 2. But so with this, I want to start back with the universal pre-K. For those students, and maybe somebody else can answer this, is there an increased number of kids who are more successful in school if they go to pre-K first? That is one of the questions I would like to have answered. So we want a graduation rates, tongue twister, up, right? And so if we can get more of those kids who can get to pre-K, that only increases their education. And I understand some of it has to start at home, and rightfully, and it should continue at home. You should be reading with your kid every single day. But in the end, we have to do what's better for children overall, which I think that's what we're all here for. So I did some of my own research as well, to include asking some of the younger children, if you had the opportunity to be in a 4 through 6 school or a K through 6 school, what would you choose? Of the 6 kids I asked, 5 of them would have preferred to be separated. And the reason being is they said at 4 through 6, like if they can get used to a bell time, get used to switching classes a little bit more, getting used to lockers, that would help them be more successful for high school. I also, one of those kids that I had asked, they had said, they're younger. They had said that they're currently in 5th grade, so they don't really know the whole high school system yet, but they had said that emotionally, and this is their words, not mine, that they're going through a lot at their age. And sometimes being around those younger children is more taxing and difficult on them, and they can't grow in ways that they want to necessarily grow. And that is coming from a 5th grader, okay? Now, with that being said, I also reached out and spoke to somebody else, and I really, this one's a teacher, and this teacher had said, by separating 4 through 6, it would provide a social and emotional benefits to it by separating those grades. And as we were going through one of the presentations today, it hits the second point on the school improvement plan, and it also hits that extra bullet point of the MTSS. She said because of separating those grades, what you're doing is as those kids are growing and as those kids are learning, you can focus more on those grades and what their emotional needs are to get them the resources that they need rather than having them all combined with younger kids. You have more individualized time with them. And that was coming from a teacher who honestly is not even in this district.
I like the integration.
I gotta tell you, I feel like I'm in a reoccurring nightmare. My 3rd year on this board now. When we started, and that's fine, you can change 3 years ago. 3 years ago when we came on, we had spoken to many of the community, and I'm not just talking about this little piece. We all got together and we said, we had people, parents from Bellamy, Joy, Gansevoort, everyone said, we want our community schools. Why do I live in this community? Why do I live in Rome? I want my community school. I want to take us back to where pre-K, I believe everyone used to be bused to pre-K at one point in the district. So I believe that at some point, and we'd have to check on it,
I believe that if you got
that
it,
we
you
had
were
to
so
make
yes.
we had to make cuts, and busing might have stopped a long time ago. So one, we could put busing back in to bus pre-K. I know we have a problem with buses. I get all of that, but we can check on that. I believe at one time we were busing, but our community, and I understand all the points that are being made, and I know that you have the best intentions in education. I agree. But I've lived here my whole life, and so have you, and many of us have, and our community is really important to us. What Kirsten was trying to say, I believe, is Staley closed. They don't have a neighborhood school. There's been so many changes. Fort Stanwix closed. Staley closed. It became a 5-6. But we keep coming back to the same point that people like their neighborhood schools. We talked before, when you talk about getting to pre-K, well, if you're in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade and you don't have transportation and you get a phone call from the nurse at your school across the city, how are you getting there? We've talked about this so many times. We've heard from so many people 3 years ago. And we all come back to the same, it's just the same thing. That's all. And I think a little differently. I get that the school district, sets forth recommendations, but we drive, the board drives too. Yeah, you were elected to serve on this board from our community at the time where it meant the most to a lot of people that said, we want a community school. So I feel a little bit differently about that. I feel like we represent. And like I said, I didn't survey 5 kids, and I didn't, I would be very interested again to see what teachers think. We did a teacher survey before, and I'm not saying that we have to do that or the RTA, but we're just back to the same thing. I almost want to say yes to anything because I don't want to not have the space anymore. Teachers shouldn't be teaching 28 and 30 kids. And our kids are all over. They're not in where they should be. But so that's why I go back to the community school. I am absolutely and can stand by 100% building another community school if it was K-6, and we have to realign. We're not drawing lines. You're drawing lines in the city. You're not going to be drawing a lot of lines at Stokes and Joy. I don't believe that. And if we are, I don't think it's going to be that much if you if you built a school if it was at RFA, and I don't know because there's debris apparently in the ground now, but that's where we started, and that's a chunk of 3 blocks from Ridge Mills. Everybody's pushed to Denty, pushed to Bellamy. That's what Kirsten's saying. So you don't have that feel. So even if you talked about keeping pre-K to 3, there's still a missing area of people who don't have that. And I agree with that. It's my personal, which is fine. It's where I was 3 years ago. It's where when we got elected and we said what we wanted to see, keep and preserve, and I know things have changed. We're in the same spot, Cassie. We have huge classrooms. If you look at what we've done in the last 3 years, it's very difficult. We hired a superintendent that we're really proud of to move us forward, but it's the same staples. It's the same staples of what we sat on here. And for that reason, it will be very difficult for me to vote a 4-6. And Sue, you're right. Is it emotional? Yeah, I have a daughter who's in RFA, so I can see what the future looks like. I also have an elementary school student. I can't imagine a big school 4, 5, and 6. It is, and I get bigger districts. And look at, Utica does K-6, and they're down the street. Yes, they do K-6.
No, they don't.
Yeah, they do.
No, they're 5-6 is in its own building. They have,
Well, and that's another thing. 5-6, I think, is 4 scares me. Just my opinion again. 4 scares me. 5-6, you're integrating everyone into it. And if I had to make a major decision and you said no, Kirsten, K through 6 can't be, I would say 5-6. 4-6 kind of scares me. They're still kind of very immature and everything. 5-6 gets the whole city integrated into each other. They get to learn and meet each other. They get to learn different aspects of life of everyone that they get to go to school with, and there probably won't be as much disciplinary action in 7 and 8. My older kids were the first 2 grades of 5-6 at Staley. Was it the best thing in the world? No, but it wasn't horrible. And they lived through it, and you know what? They're probably better humans because they just got, they were in it, they learned it, they thrown into it. If that was my decision where you're telling me that you can't do the other way, I would have to say, if everyone thinks about it, bringing everyone together sooner than just throwing them in at 7 and 8, I think is very smart. 4 scares me, my personal opinion. I don't know, I just think they're a little immature. I don't think they're ready to see what they might see at 5 and 6, and it might only be a year, but I don't know. I've seen it.
but they'd be separated in a different way. But
Okay, but
real
again,
quick,
we
I
get
do
to
want to
go, yeah,
ask
so-
a very pointed question. How many K-6s or how big of a K-6 would we need to get to a place to have community schools and keep a K-6 configuration?
I think Craig is going to pull some numbers, but I think realistically, you would have to pull approximately 800 to 1,000 students at minimum, and that would still not necessarily give us all the room in all of the other K-6 buildings.
800 out of all of them.
So we're talking between 150 to 200 kids in the current 6 elementary schools that you have.
So, question about this sheet. So options, or scenario 1, 2, 3, 4, they all assume that Clough is the school that's chosen? Because I didn't see anything in there about Rome Catholic.
Yeah, so I took some liberty in that because we didn't have much information on hand to dig into those and provide samples for each of those. Okay. So we had some information from 2019 that I used Clough as the general, so I could try to provide you some visions of what could be, regardless of what site you
so
do.
This is all Clough.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
And the model, the number of rooms, could be replicated at any location.
I think the only thing I would say, though, about when we utilize, we do have to start to think about the fact that with this building here, if all of it goes through with what President Trump is suggesting as far as all federal workers have to go back into the office, you're going to start seeing more and more of a trying to get up Floyd Ave to get into that building because they only have one entrance point. And if they're all going every single day to those two buildings, we absolutely then have to try and find a different route to get into this building, in and out, because...
If they do that, though, if they do that, are they going to... If they do, I mean, obviously, we would have to talk with the city and stuff, but do they plan on making it... I mean, at one point, everyone went to work on the base.
Not in a single.
They never
No,
went...
I'm not saying, I'm not, but before COVID, right?
Now everyone has to diverge into one.
There's only one security entrance they all have to go through, and they all have to scan their badge now as going through.
You mean
So
they had
it's
different parts before?
It's a whole brand-new thing for DFAS and Rome Labs. So my only point is, we would absolutely have to look at another
Roundabout or
Yes.
road into this area. So I just wanted to bring that up.
And we have started looking into that. We had our surveyor go into starting looking at the boundaries, so we know where the property lines are and who owns those roads and things. So we are gathering that information for these locations to make sure we could do that. But you mentioned that. Let me. I just screwed this up here. There we go. So I know one of the questions that came from the previous meeting was trying to envision, and I used some of the previous, you probably remember, some of these images for Clough to give you an idea of, the facility. This one in specific shows like the two-story addition and all the ancillary spaces. This is a two-way in and out, and it affords the opportunity for parents to be able to do their drop-off and then come out, I believe, right here through this location, and then it keeps it separate from the bus location. So there's multiple driveways in that. And what we are looking at is, if you look to the upper right here, where the graphic kind of falls off, that's where we're investigating the property line to see if we can also use that as a second means to get out. Yes. Yep.
I want to make sure we do not lose an important point. I think, Georgia, you mentioned that if we were to build another K-6 to create the community schools you're talking about, we're talking about having to transition almost 800 and maybe a little bit more students that are currently in their attendance area, or what we call catchment area, to that new K-6. 800.
And that doesn't include with the growth that we're expecting with these new businesses and so forth. So when we were talking about building a building for 6, that was going to be somewhere between 1,000 and 1,200. That still is the number that we're looking to build to, because we know that realistically, that's the number of students we're going to have to move one way or the other.
And I've lived to a redistricting, and I can tell you, when it comes to you talking about emotionality and also relationship, I am telling you, let's say you decided to talk to people at John Joy and say your catchment area has to move into that new attendance zone for that new K-6. You really want to see people get upset? That's what's going to happen. We have no choice but to redistrict the entire district if we were to build another K-6 to accommodate the 800 students. And a lot of people, some may want to move, but some will not, because they will tell you they purchased their home in the area that they're currently residing in for that reason. Mm-hmm. And so we're not talking about 50 people, we're talking about 800 students.
So that's when we have to now be the voice for our community and make them realize that, you know what I'm saying? So that they understand. I think it's very hard because they don't understand. And we are very transparent, where they don't think we really are. That's why I'm saying the things I'm saying to you, and with the passion that I have with it, because if you want one thing, okay, what you're telling us, the community's telling, you can't, we can't, we really can't. You just told, Georgia just said, and you just said, It's going to be 800 people. So at the end of the day, they have to realize when they come to us in the community, not on social media, not on other things, the community comes to us saying these things, that we can't provide that. It's just not going, it's not feasible, and it can't happen. So at that point, you can't have it all. So this is what we have, and this is what's out there.
And the reason why we made some of the recommendations is because we understand that their current catchment area is important. And so that's why we said at the foundational level, it would be best to keep everyone where they are currently residing right now to go to either starting at 4-year-old all the way to 3rd grade. And then at 4-6, now everyone can converge. Similar, you get no complaint when people have to converge at 7th and 8th grade at middle school. Now, 4, 5, 6, they can come together under one umbrella. That's why we wanted to leave the catchment area the same within K6, because I understand, I call the political love language of this district. I've learned it real quick, and I've learned that if you move one person's cheese, they're going to get upset. So that's why I thought foundational-wise, we needed to keep them currently where they are residing.
How many kids at Staley were there?
Staley, they told me at some point I heard a number of 500, and then I heard 800. So, Jen D?
No. 5-6.
The 5-6 for Staley.
No, I'm talking about K6.
Oh, I apologize.
Oh, K6?
The old Staley had, like Stroud, almost 800 students. Because there was two
yeah,
classes.
No.
There was two
I'm saying
classes.
when Staley was flooded, how many kids were in that school?
We had to move over 600.
600.
600.
So all I'm saying is 600 kids have been moved too, so it's not like they've been shuffled, and I can understand we don't want to shuffle anymore. That's all.
When there's an emergency, if there's an emergency where a school building is flooded, and you tell a parent, listen, we have no choice but to move your kids into wherever we have space, that's different than when you build in a brand new building and you say to whoever it is, pick me, pick you, pick whoever, and say, okay, now that we've built a K6, we have to move 800 students to that K6. Some areas have to shift. That's when you will see people will not like it. Because imagine, we're only talking about students converging under the same roof at 4, 5, 6, and people are like, well, I don't want to be touched. I don't want that change. So imagine when you have to redistrict the whole district. That's going to be even worse.
Well,
I have a question about the 4 through 6 busing. Would they be included in the elementary bus schedule or the middle school bus schedule? And you're going.
She said those details would work out later. We talked about that last time.
You don't know.
So part of the bigger plan, because remember, this is a 3-year process. Once you pick a location and you say, you know what, this is the direction that we're comfortable with, then we can start working on stuff. But in terms of start and end time, which is what you're talking about, this is the opportunity for us to work with multiple stakeholders to really kind of figure, okay, if we're going to build a 4, 5, 6, what is going to be the end or start, the start time and end times? Because these things that we're doing provides us an opportunity to also look at our current start and end times, because we know that research shows that secondary, high schoolers, middle schoolers would like to come a little bit later. So that's when you engage in those discussions. Building a building gives you the opportunity to also see what are some of the other things that we always wanted to come to the table about to try to fix all at once. It gives you the opportunity to do that. So we will be engaging, when we built a elementary school, in those conversations with union leadership to say, is it time for us to flip the schedule? Have secondary start a little bit later and have elementary go earlier? And I can tell you, transportation would like that. And I know a lot of older students at the secondary level that would prefer to come to school a little bit later than they are right now.
I think that's something that you just touched on that's really important, is that, yes, it's going to be a process over time once we figure out what configuration we're doing and what school we're doing, because I know I drive some kids to Stroud in the morning, and then right after have to drive some other kids to RFA, and the start time's the same. But I also want everybody to know that I do think that is something that you're going to look at. If there is a pre-K through 3 and it starts at this time, and then there's a 4 through 6, like at what time, are the schools going to be receiving it? I think that it's important to let people know that you're aware of that, and when we can receive kids, and
We are nearing the 3-hour mark, and while I love spending time with you, I do think we need to make a decision probably on buildings to at least give an indication of, are we still interested in RCS as a very potential solution, so that we can have those conversations with the diocese and the broker. Are there any of the 3 kind of properties, RFA or old site, RCS, Clough, that we are just definitely not interested in, and we've narrowed it down to 2? Because the ask from the district is, given this is a long-range plan, and Nerlon needs to start coming up with a plan for September, at the next board meeting, that we make a decision.
I just have a very big problem. I have a very big problem with the stadium. And the stadium support was my number 1. It honestly was my number 1. I fought with, I battled and gave my case to John, and I really, I had some good points that, he was, and now that really just throws me where I think that we're looking at something that's just not even feasible or remotely, we don't even know what we're getting into until we get there. So that's just my opinion on that one. And I don't know how you guys feel about that after hearing that. To me, if I was to tell you one thing that I would have to say no to, it would have to be that, and that was my number 1. And that really makes me upset, because that was my number 1. And I'm not afraid to admit when I may be not right. I won't say wrong, but not right.
I think given the information that was provided tonight about stadium support, you can remove that out of the options. I would still consider RCS, but out of the 2, I would lean to Clough, just because of its location. My one concern that's kind of been brought up earlier by Sue and others is the transportation getting in and out, but I think there's workarounds. I don't know if there's a possibility with the new roundabout. I know they're not opening up Bell Road, but that would be fantastic, and maybe a consideration if we talk to the right people and work the right channels, or the MV entrance. But yeah, I would consider Clough for RCS, but I would lean towards Clough.
I think it's the smartest. That's better.
Craig, you look like a very honest and reputable man.
Yeah.
I don't understand how we just were at a place, though, where we had decided that we were going to build on a site that now we're saying we can't. That's all.
I actually didn't know it until probably about a couple weeks ago that I heard that we were talking in one of our meetings, and someone brought up, oh, well, I remember this is what happened. So that wasn't under our purview. It was the prior firm.
Okay.
So we didn't know that either. It's kind of unusual to even do that. But, you hear that information. Honestly, I don't know until I go out there and dig. I'm going to have geotechnical engineers and everybody going wherever you choose to go and investigate what we're running into and conditions and things like that. So that's like a lot of other stuff. I just felt I had to raise that, because if you're looking at building a school and you look at the 3 sites, that one has a lot of, I'm going to call baggage with it. The foundation's just this one part. If SED knows you're doing any development on that site, they're going to say, oh, but look at your BCS. You got to do something with the stadium complex. And I think we would be severely challenged in looking at, if you want to keep the stadium in the fields, how we can do vehicular circulation on there properly, account for parent drop-offs. Unfortunately, that's something, that's like the last 10, 15 years has become the norm.
Which we
try
thought
to make
before
that work.
the parking would be, that was something that had come. So I mean, if that's the case, then I think we could take that one, especially with finding that we don't know it's going to be. So I would leave the two, Rome Catholic or Clough.
I'm still rooting for Rome Catholic. I think I definitely have concerns about congestion and the amount of traffic that goes through this area. This is also a very narrow road. Like sometimes when I'm driving to this board meeting and there's a car coming, I'm like, ooh, do I pull over? And so imagining 1,200 potentially, 1,200 students coming in and out of here. I think Ms. Langton said it well last. The security and emergency factor is really big for me because you can't predict that stuff. And so RCS remains my number one.
Mine would be, I am absolutely concerned about, as was just said, about the in egress and out of here. But the other thing about Rome Catholic is, to me, there's more potential. If we were to be able to grow more, to me, you have more land there, and I just feel it's a better option.
Doesn't sound that good now, but I'm not sure about the other ones yet. Maybe next week.
Next week? Next week we'll know more. Oh, okay.
I'm good with taking stadium off, but I'm still in decision mode about either. I think they both have their pros and cons, so I don't have one figured out yet.
So for taking stadium support off.
I'm gonna cry. This was my baby. That was my one, I know.
And that will leave the so do we need to make a configuration decision next board meeting or just building?
I was
So I would suggest that at our next meeting on February 10th, we move forward with the location. Then we can answer any additional questions at the following meeting in February regarding configuration, because I think it's a bigger topic than the location, so that you can make a final decision the first board meeting in March. That will give us plenty of time to still work through our designs and put other configurations and possibilities together for you, but then be ready for a May vote in terms of the proposition.
Either way, those two properties can handle whatever we decide, right?
Absolutely.
Yes.
I know we asked this 100 times, but I'm so far gone at this point.
No, you're fine.
Okay.
Yes, and it's any configuration. It's not just PK4 or, K6. Anything that you want. Both of those locations have enough space to be able to do that, and we've done those studies with CNS and with Labella multiple times. It's just a matter of picking the location, and then we can move to the next step.
You're going to make sure to talk to...
Would you know about the access then for this building by the February 10th date?
Yeah.
I will do my best, but I can't make a guarantee on that yet. We're working with the surveyor, and we're trying to get that information from them. And then we need to reach out.
Well, the other piece that I wanted to clarify is, I know you talked about the pre-K being a lot of money. Just so you know, we get a UPK grant.
We're not fully, right?
And currently, we can't access all of the money that we, because it's based on the total number of students you serve. And so let's just say, for example, if you have a grant for $3 million, then to service 350 students, and you're not servicing 350, you're servicing 216, then you only get enough for the 216. So you're not accessing all of that money that's available to you. So I want to make sure that the public understands. Universal Pre-K, we get an SED grant for that, to run that. That's number one.
Money for busing for them?
No. And number two, I just want to say I am very, very pleased with the board. I've said that you guys are a dream team, and we know that these decisions are hard because there's a lot of information that you have to run through. A little discourse is good because you want to understand, and the community can see that you took their feedback to heart. And I can tell you, behind the scenes, my teammate and I, we heard you here when you asked for more analysis. We also heard the public. I myself had a chance to talk to each person who presented at the board meeting last time and called them and allowed them the opportunity to ask questions. People who have emailed the board have heard directly from me, and sometimes these conversations would be about 45 minutes to an hour. And at the end, most of them would say, I know you have a tough decision in front of you. So no matter what, we know that it's difficult, but I am very pleased that as a collective board, that you know that it's a tough job, but yet together you are making it happen. The same thing we did with our team. You posed some questions, the community gave us feedback, we paused, we went back. We had a cabinet meeting, then we met with our partners, CNS and Labella, and we said, here's the information we need. So every time you ask a question or the community asks a question, know that it doesn't go unheard. We hear it, we take it back, we look at the numbers again. Some of you have asked about pre-K. Are we going to put both 3-year-old and 4-year-old? So we backtrack and we say, you know what, that's a great question, because part of the UPK grant requires that you have partnership with community-based organizations. So myself and our assistant superintendent of curriculum and instruction said, you know what, it makes sense to just do the 4-year-old and have 3-year-old be part of the community-based organization. So all of these things that you're asking, that's great, but remember, that's part of the long-term planning. But I say all of that to say, I love this board. I love that you can go back and forth and take a look at the information and then be able to share your opinion, because it gives us an opportunity to also think things through. So thank you for having this discourse today, and the community could see that you are listening. And I know some of us are more emotionally attached than others, but the reality is you've had that discourse, and I appreciate it.
So, Nurlan, so that UPK grant, it does eventually end, right? I've never seen a grant that just goes on forever.
So I can say with fidelity that the UPK grant, you keep applying for it every year. You can actually file for expansions on it, and that would be our intention in order to grow our four-year-old program. At this time, we have slots for 266 at the 4-year-old space, and we have probably between 80 and 100 spots that we don't utilize, which ends up leaving between $500,000 and $750,000 on the table every year.
Yeah, but I guess it just seems like you could have a state budget crisis where all of a sudden, okay, now things are getting cut, and so that could...
That's always a possibility. In my 14 years overseeing UPK, as a matter of fact, I've gotten increases rather than decreases. But we know that state budget is always a possibility. Anything can be cut at any time. Right. So I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, that will never happen. But in my 14 years with UPK, I've gotten increases. 2 years ago, we applied for $1 million and we got it, so... And this district, because remember, the state is all about looking at city schools and our poverty rate and seeing what can we do to make sure that all of our students are being serviced. And I'm just pleased that Rome have the opportunity to get more money to service our UPK students. So.
And if you looked at the fiscal report that I provided in my Newsweek letter, regarding the environmental piece, because of those exact reasons where we're possibly going to go up to that next level, I believe that they will continue to fund pre-K grants and money towards us.
At capacity, because there's a transportation issue where families can't get here. So, I mean, that's very important piece to understand. I mean, I understand the importance of it. So we think if we were able to put it in the schools, then more people would be able to utilize the free service for families, takes away from daycare, all of those things, to have universal pre-K.
That's a good point.
I mean,
I didn't think about it like that at all, about why you would be putting, besides the bus piece, because I thought that was part of the grant of them getting transportation. They just weren't utilizing the service. But if you're saying that putting it in the school, your home, or your catchment zone or whatever, and then they would take that away, like Kelly just said. I mean, that does make an important It's another piece that people don't realize, because I would have never thought of it.
We
honestly.
expect, because of statistics the way that they are, with more foundation at the PK through 3-year-old levels, if you have more students that are able to go to PK because of transportation and all those things, we would expect that in the next 10 years you would see your graduation rates increase drastically. We would see our proficiency rates going up because you would have those students starting earlier. We know that this should be starting at a parent level, but there's a lot of different reasons why that doesn't happen. And so we as a school district have to take that responsibility on, because at the end of the day, it's still our responsibility to graduate those students. It's still our responsibility to make sure they're proficient. So if we can give those kids that option in 3rd and 4th grade, then we're setting our district up for success moving into the next decade.
And if you were to survey some kindergarten teachers right now who has kids who did not go to UPK, they will tell you they're essentially starting from day one, because some of the executive functioning skills are not there. Letter sounding, all of those things that you could get in a UPK and be prepared for kindergarten. It's almost like, think about kindergarten as kind of like 1st grade right now. So if you have UPK, you want to prep them so that they could do 1st grade work at kindergarten. And the 1st graders should be doing 2nd grade work at 1st grade. So those are the kinds of things that we're trying to prepare students for long term.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on that I think pre-K is absolutely necessary for the reasons already stated. And as a parent that's had currently kids in pre-K the last 2 years, I think transportation, that help would definitely be a huge benefit to the community, because last year was at RCS and Clough, and now Clough, somebody having to travel outside of their, a lot of people mentioned neighborhood schools, community schools, having that pre-K student in your school that's down the street versus a few miles on the other side of town is a big convenience factor. But I just wanted to bring up a couple points I was thinking about after I spoke about the locations that are my main concerns about RCS. One of them's the sale and purchase. Yes, it's still pending. Yes, they want us to negotiate, but as CNS mentioned last meeting, that's a big question mark, timeline, and basically out of our control. Second point was costs. I think if you remember correctly, it was an additional cost to RCS, and basically that's because my kids were at RCS the last couple of years, and it is basically a rebuild. That's the way you have to kind of view it. It'd be great. Initially when it came for sale, I'm like, great, we can just move in, we can get some kids in there, but that's not the case. And even they had to have the windows open in the middle of winter because they couldn't control the temperature in there. So you know, you really need to think about that location as a complete rebuild. And I think the CNS individual, Nate, mentioned last time that you wouldn't want a brand new part of the building and an old part, so he's basically has to redo the configurations of all of it. So that's something to consider. And then as far as traffic, I don't love the traffic here, but also RCS also has traffic concerns that Chestnut gets very busy, and Turn, you have all the people coming in, speaking of coming from the base, routing up Lee. Around that time, I imagine in the morning and in the afternoons, particularly around that bend around Hannaford, you're going to have quite a bit of traffic flow. So that's maybe not quite as bad as here, but also something to consider.
All right. Well, much to consider before next meeting. To cap out the rest of the agenda, as a reminder, next meeting we will be going into executive session for Superintendent Anselm's mid-year review. And then I think we touched on this a little bit during the superintendent brief. A reminder, February 7th at 10 a.m. We have our Bellamy school tour. Please let Sandy know as soon as possible if you will be able to make that. And then absolute must, exclamation mark, March 5th for our retreat.
Yep. Do we know where that is?
Do we know where the board retreat is?
It's going to be here? Here.
Wonderful.
There you go. See? Sandy knows everything.
Come on down. You know where it is. All right. Thank you all for hanging in there. Great discussion. And with that, I will make a motion to adjourn our...
Public comment?
No.
Okay.
Moved by Kirsten. Second by John. Any last discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much.